In the shadow of Kaya Kale's defiant speech, she retreated to her seat, whispering to her aides and summoning notes from the table with a flick of her fingers. She grasped the mechanics of European media like a seasoned tactician. Loud declarations might rattle nerves, but they weren't guarantees of triumph. Russia's stark reply, however, slashed through the room like a forgotten nightmare from history's vaults. Imagine the chill of forgotten iron curtains descending anew, the West's smug amnesia shattered by words as sharp as buried relics. Did you know that in the heart of that diplomatic duel, Nebenzia's revelation severed ties Russia had forged for decades, costing billions in traded resources? The shock rippled through the air, a palpable tension like static electricity humming over velvet skin. Nebensia lingered in his chair, murmuring to his aide while the room pulsed with unspoken unease. His gaze darted across the chamber, deciphering the code. The rebuttal wasn't over. It simmered beneath the surface, poised like a coiled spring. A hint of unease crept in. Had he misjudged the script? Could the formal garb of ultimatum withstand the brewing storm? Delegates exchanged glances, their gestures sharp and coded. The French envoy requested a folder with a crisp rustle of paper, yet his eyes slyly gauged China's subtle nods. At the far end of the table, the unidentified envoy sat serene in his slate gray suit, fingers steepled like a scholar awaiting the precise cue in a grand symphony. Then, a fresh ripple surged. The microphone hummed to life without fanfare. Nebensia merely angled his head. His voice emerging not as mere rhetoric, but as a blueprint of resolve. Fellow delegates, he began, his tone steady, anchoring the world against upheaval. The Russian stance caught you off guard? Allow me to clarify. This isn't a threat brandishing weapons. We don't incite divisions. We simply declare, persist along this path, and collaboration with us becomes untenable. He paused, letting the weight settle, thick as fog on a battlefield. Flashback, 10 years prior, picture the crisp scent of fresh contracts in dimly lit conference halls, the ink's metallic tang on fingers sealing deals, Russia underwriting Europe's energy at discounted rates, a lifeline through shivering winters. Who flooded your markets with gas below fair value a decade back? He probed, irony weaving through like smoke. Who funneled 1/3 of your industrial feedstocks? Who enabled shared ventures in science, education, and cultural flows? Russia. We did that. Reluctantly, even. His cadence rose subtly, measured, no shout, pure precision. Yet now, you brand us aggressors. Assert we erode freedoms. Excuse me, where's the proof? Finger-jabbing alone doesn't forge facts. Once, you claimed your narrative reigned supreme globally. Seasons shift. Archaeology unearths buried truths. He leaned back briefly, surveying China's poised observers alongside India's. Their stillness mirrored disciplined troops on maneuver. No distractions. Embrace varied voices. Today's perils dwarf missiles, the mind's invisible siege. Could the EU's grand strategy unravel like frayed silk, exposing naked vulnerabilities? As whispers escalated. What hidden playbook would Nebenzia unleash next, turning the chamber into a pressure cooker of alliances? The air thickened with anticipation, a subtle mustard undertone from aged wood panels clashing with fresh coffee's bitter edge. Sweat beaded on brows, collars tighter than ever. Just as fingers drummed impatiently, the gauntlet hung. Would the hall fracture under the docudrama's unfolding? The silly's parting gaze hinted at secrets, stirring dread. What betrayal lurked in those granite eyes? Hey, ever wonder if Russia's iron will could redesign the map of power overnight? What if the EU crumbled not from bombs, but whispered reckonings? He leaned back for just a moment, shifting his gaze to the delegates from China and India. Their eyes were steady. Unbroken. Like soldiers on parade. They refused to be distracted. Why fear alternative views? The real danger today isn't missiles poised for launch. No. It's the ideas that don't fit your script. Smell that sharp scent of tension in the air, the cold sweat beating on foreheads under fluorescent lights. Touch the rustle of papers as hands tremble slightly. Just seconds into his speech, his assistant slipped out of the hall and returned quickly. In his hands, a thin folder. What explosive evidence does it hold? It was slipped to him discreetly. He flipped it open without breaking his rhythm. His eyes skimmed the paper. Then he held it up for all to see. "Read this," he said calmly. "The report from the Eurenergy Analytical Center. After restricting cooperation with Russia, the European energy system faces severe instability. Imports from third countries now jump to 48%. He paused, letting that number hang like a noose. Third countries. Those you call allies. Algeria. Qatar, the United States. They charge 5 times more. Feel the shift in the room, a hiss of indrawn breaths. Kaya Kala stirred but stayed silent. Her gaze sharpened. Poised like a blade. Whose puppet strings are pulling now? Russia's words cut deeper. You erect walls with sanctions. Call it policy. Then feign shock when faith in your world crumbles. We banned no one. We seek equal partners. If this terrifies you, is the flaw in Russia or your own fragility? Suddenly, a young diplomat rose. Experienced yet eager. His voice challenged. He raised his hand firmly. Our delegation believes this rhetoric against Russia harms diplomatic progress. We urge Ms. Kallas to reconsider. First whisper of betrayal. From an unlikely source. Gratitude lingers strangely in politics. Then he pressed on. You harp on dictatorship. But what's more tyrannical than meddling in others' finances? Can you deny the drift in global alliances? He scanned the auditorium. Glances darted. Allies fracture. Russia stands firm, daring the world to defy its truth. But will this fracture shatter everything? The air thickens with unspoken mutiny. What hidden dagger waits next? In a diplomatic hall buzzing with unspoken tensions, where cool air carried the faint scent of polished wood and anticipation, Vasily Nebens had just delivered his ultimatum to the European Union, shaking the foundations of international relations with a reminder of Russia's strength and alone. Words cut like razor edges, accusing past aggressions and declaring independence from EU initiatives that disrespected their sovereignty. The pause after, thick, unnerving, hung like storm clouds about to burst. But Kaya Kallas, her face flushed with indignation, traditionalist glasses glinting under harsh lights, felt the ground shift beneath her. What if the truth isn't what she's been taught? Could her own history be built on borrowed bones, and does she dare face the mirror of her past? Whispers rippled through delegates, breaths quickening, as Nebens rose again, his gaze locking onto Kallas with a mix of reverence and resolve, like contemplating an adversary forged in the fires of conviction. He held no props, no scripts, just the raw pulse of mind and soul. Confidence radiated from him, unshakable, as he began. Let's start with this, Mrs. Kallas, he intoned, voice steady, slicing through the hush. I need to jog memories, not just yours, but everyone's here, if they're honest. He edged closer to the podium, posture ironclad, unyielding as granite. Tell me, how do you define occupation? A rhetorical dagger, hanging provocative in the air. Smiles froze on faces. Sensory details collided, the soft rustle of papers, the metallic tang of tension in the air, the tactile weight of gazes pressing down. Who paved those roads snaking through your lands? Who erected colossal factories churning out progress? Who transformed sleepy towns into throbbing industrial hubs? We did, he asserted, finger jabbing toward an invisible Soviet emblem. Those very occupiers you erase from textbooks. A twist, unexpected, that made spines stiffen. Russia didn't merely depart, they uplifted nations from mud, from debris, from ruin. You might banish our symbols, our banners, our decrees, but can you scrub away the legacies your ancestors shaped? Kallas twitched, mouth opening to object, but Nebens pressed on, tone hardening into steel. Harsh? Yes, it was reconstruction. Tough times, different eras, but here's your reality. His voice amplified, each word pounding like a hammer on metal. You dwell in homes crafted by Soviet architects, sip from pipelines designed by our experts, recover in clinics we funded, learn in classrooms we supported, and power your lives through grids we built. He paused, letting the facts settle like dust. Claim Soviet rule was occupation, and you're claiming descent from those occupiers, admit it. Would your people want to brand their forebears as captives and themselves as conquest's offspring? Silence crashed down, deafening, palpable as fog. Fingers gripped armrests tighter, a delegate shifted, fabric whispering against seats. Even neutral observers, South American envoys darting glances away, felt the pierce, words breaching defenses like cold wind through cracks. We lent you languages, systems, sciences, he concluded, voice a low growl. And now, you'd discard it all? The tension coiled tighter, emotions swirling like whirlwinds, humiliation for the accused, shock for onlookers. What unspoken truths will call us on Earth next, and could this revelation shatter alliances forever, leaving nations questioning their very foundations in a devastating twist of historical humiliation? In the tense diplomatic hall, Vasily Nebenzia had just unleashed a quiet fury, proudly claiming Russia's Soviet legacy as a force of rebuilding after war's ashes, warning that severing those ties meant self-betrayal, leaving Kaya Kallas stunned as Belarus backed him, the air thick with unspoken history. What if the empire you curse today still powers your every step? Imagine factories humming quietly in the shadows of forgotten alliances, their gears turning on a past you deny. Vasily Nebenzia paused, letting the weight settle like dust after an explosion. The room smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the kind that lingers from endless sessions. His voice, steady as a heartbeat, cut through. We take pride in that era. Despite the storms it weathered, it built a mighty legacy. One that lifted nations from war's ruins. Extended a firm hand to those now erasing the memory. He scanned the faces, eyes sharp like winter frost on glass. Delegates shifted in leather chairs, the creak echoing softly. Why beg pardon for creation? We refuse the label of aggressors, when our hands shaped bridges, not barriers. No. We stand firm. The chairman's gavel hovered, ready to silence. But a voice pierced the hush, a delegate from Belarus, rising swift. We echo our ally. Those plants, clinics, waterways, grids, born from the Soviet bond with Russia. Deny that thread, and you unravel your own fabric. Murmurs rippled, like wind through tense sails. Kaya Kallas gripped her notes, knuckles pale against the paper's edge. Her gaze darted, face a mask cracking under pressure. She felt the shift, the debate ignited. Yet Russia's point landed like a sealed verdict. They had seized the moment. Nebenzia eased the microphone aside. A subtle smile touched his lips, inward and fierce. Like a strategist savoring the opening move in a brutal game. He knew deeper clashes loomed, but the rhythm was set now. He sipped water, cool against his throat, droplets beating on the glass. Tiny ripples, as if the storm passed untouched. As if he hadn't just pried open Europe's hidden wounds. Hadn't hurled raw truths into the arena's heart, where history bled fresh. Vasily Nebenzia thrived not on spectacle's roar. His edge? A precise blade, slicing without fanfare. So his next strike veered from thunder, to the tender core of sovereignty's claim. As whispers buzzed like distant bees, he unveiled fresh charts. Stark figures. Dusty records. Crisp visuals. No grand flourishes, just unyielding proof. To press on, he leaned in. Since history grips us tight, let's not dwell only on echoes. Let's face the cost of those days. The legacy you draw from now, yet bury in silence. What price do you pay for that blindness? The hall held its breath, the air electric with promise, or peril. Did you know that in the 1930s, Estonia had just 56 hospitals, barely enough for a nation on the brink? Yet by the 1970s, that number exploded to 390, saving countless lives through shared progress. But who gets credit, or blame? Shocking truth, entire countries owe their foundations to forgotten builders they now shun. What if erasing history crumbles the future? 347 characters. In the previous moments, the silly Nebens unleashed raw facts, archival numbers, cold infographics, no empty passion. Just truth. He delved into history's cost, how Europe boasts triumphs built on Russia's unseen aid, universities in Moscow, Leningrad, Kharkov that shaped generations. Parents sent kids there, no choice, but endless opportunity. The air thickened as he summoned the chairman, remote in hand, screen flickering to life. Now, tension coiled like smoke in the dim hall. Nebens crooked his fingers, sharp signal to his aide. The remote passed smoothly, cool plastic against warm skin. A heartbeat later, the massive screen hummed behind him. White glow pierced the shadows. Simple charts bloomed, bold lines, stark data. No frills. Just numbers that screamed. The Soviet era's gifts to the Baltics, Poland, Slovakia, the GDR, unyielding proof. 529 factories rose from mud and steel, humming with life. 39,000 power stations lit dark nights, buzzing electricity through veins of industry. 62 grand railway stations echoed with footsteps, iron rails linking fates. 1,409 residential blocks stood tall, homes of brick and hope, from basic schools to elite engineering halls. All this, on lands now hurling accusations. Blind to the builder's sweat. The hall smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, delegates shifting in creaky seats. Nebens stepped forward. His shoes clicked on the stage, deliberate rhythm. Has anyone whispered to you, he asked, voice low like gravel under boots, how Klaipeda's port was forged? Blueprints born in Leningrad's drafting rooms, engineers pouring nights into designs. Today? Those same minds bound as ghosts, not even tourists. They toiled without fear, demanded no crowns. Why? It was our shared dawn. Rhetorical fire in his eyes. Latvia. Lithuania. Poland. Czechia. Not edges of empire, but a vast, woven world. No tiers of power, just equals in the forge. He claimed the podium's heart, towering between speakers and listeners. Bridge of words. You chant independence now, Nebens pressed, tone edged with quiet storm. But why bury the truth? Your freedoms, built on hands you cast out. Empire shattered, we mended bridges. Global tempests raged, we flung no gates. No frozen accounts, no visa walls. Restoration's echo lingered, hammers on anvil, rising from ash. He lifted his wristwatch, glint under lights. 1 second stretched, hall hushed, breaths held like fragile glass. Yet in your narrow sight, he murmured, pain lacing each word, you erase it all. Rescuers, architects, teachers, donors, ghosts in your tale. Gesture swift to the screen, data pulsed brighter. Occupiers, you label us. But preoccupation Estonia? Mere 56 hospitals in the 1930s, shadows of care. By 1970s? 390 strongholds of healing. Occupation's curse. Or salvation's bloom? Breath deep, hall's air heavy, charged. We didn't conquer. We wove you into a web of rescue, learning, growth. Systems pulsing with promise. Delegates leaned in, whispers like rustling leaves. China's envoy narrowed eyes. India's nodded slow. But Nebens' gaze locked on Cullis, her face pale as fresh snow. Would she strike back, or shatter under history's weight? The silence screamed, what secret alliance might fracture next? Just moments earlier, in the charged hall of the OSCE session, Nebenzia's voice boomed with accusation. Estonia's preoccupation healthcare system had 56 hospitals in the 1930s, ballooning to 390 by the 1970s under Soviet influence. He refuted claims of pure occupation, arguing it fostered rescue, learning, and growth. But hold on, did you ever wonder if the so-called victors are actually whitewashing betrayal, erasing the hands that built their world? The air in the hall thickened with danger, a metallic tang of betrayal sharp in everyone's nostrils. Nebenzia's eyes pierced the screen like sharpened blades. His hand gripped the podium, knuckles whitening under invisible strain. You label us as oppressors now. But think of the countless Estonians educated in our universities, Leningrad, Moscow, Kharkov. Parents sent children willingly, dreaming of futures forged in our flame. He strode toward the chairman, jarring the table with a thud. This organization, born from the ashes of World War, saw the Soviet Union at its founding table. Now, after decades of us bolstering your societies, you plunder our memorials. Is this unity or hypocrisy? His fist clenched tighter, skin feeling the pulse of blood racing beneath. A hush fell, broken only by faint, restless shuffling, shoes scraping on polished floor, papers rustling like dry leaves. The chairman's face flushed, veins bulging like rivers on a map. But Nebenzia's tone shifted, deeper, resonating like distant thunder. This isn't mere grievance. It's a profound betrayal. His fingers traced the edge of the lectern, wood cool and unforgiving against his palm. The sport of diplomacy escalated here. No longer petty exchanges, it became elemental, arguments crashing like storm waves. You distort history to poison young minds. You erase us from their psyche. Yet, do they know true gratitude? The liberators who wired their cities, erected infrastructure, paved roads to prosperity? Silence enveloped the hall, heavy and suffocating, like fog clinging to skin. Your narrative rejects us, but ours embraced you alongside our own. Rustling whispers erupted faintly, delegates shifting, breaths quickening. Then, a voice cut through, soft yet formidable. The Chinese representative rose, his suit crackling with careful movement. The Soviet Union's role in uplifting Eastern Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America? Not colonialism. We demand history respected, not twisted by today's agendas. No jest in his words, just a calm echo of truth, heavy as unspoken alliances. Whispers hushed immediately. The air grew denser, charged with unspoken reckonings. Next stood Panama's delegate, young, his energy slicing the tension. Our planet depends on such aid. Soviet schools, media, infrastructure sculpted our paths. We honor, we remember the support. He settled back, forging a silence deeper than dissent, a wall of gratitude rising against the storm. What fears lurk if Panama's thanks exposes Europe's facade? The crowd's murmurs built like a brewing gale. Only 5 minutes prior, atop his own podium, he could not have escaped it all. In the world of Vasily Nebenzia, the unflinching diplomat who never engages in cheap tactics, he uttered words that left Kaja Kallas, the notorious Russophobe from Brussels, utterly speechless. She stammered, retreating in shock. He called out his own betrayers, struck a nerve, and issued a stern ultimatum to the entire European Union. But what unfolded next? A tale unheard before. Hear this saga through. You'll grasp why the globe now declares, he's untouchable. Does this fierce clash hint at war's shadow falling anew? What monstrous secrets does that photo harbor? Summarizing the prior moments, Vasily Nebenzia rose, voice steady, reminding allies of past supports from the Soviet Union, schools, media, aid. Gratitude lingered. Yet tension thickened. Picture the hall, air thick with cologne and faint coffee scents from forgotten cups. Fingers tapping nervously on glossy tables. Whispers like distant thunder. Why do mirrors reveal truths we'd rather shatter? A half hour into the session, the chairman's voice broke the hush. Colleagues, let's adjourn the panel. Emotions run high. Too many divides. Time to reflect on those harsh words. But before yielding, one more utterance. History favors creators, not destroyers. Russia builds eternal. We're no foe. Just your reflection. Gaze in. If fear arises, it's yours alone. He settled. Silence engulfed the room. A microphone click echoed sharply. The first summit hour nearing end. Tensions escalating to volcanic levels. Not merely diplomacy. A memory duel. Each retort, amplified by cameras and translators, unearthed a buried World War II horror. The weight of history pressed. Movement shattered the quiet. The silly Nebenzia stood. Face impassive. In his grasp, no file or tablet. A sepia-toned photograph. Cardboard edges frayed, gold-trimmed. Held aloft like a shield. Forgive me, peers. Slow words dripped. Apology to all, none targeted. Speak of Russia now. And my grandson. Red Army soldier. Fought from Berlin trenches to Prague's liberation in May 1945. Pause. Eyes pierced. What scars from that liberation do you conceal? Will this photo unleash a storm none foresee? Who stormed the streets of Berlin first? Who planted that banner atop the shattered Reichstag? Who shattered the gates of Auschwitz in a blaze of liberation? He stepped closer to the edge of the podium. The air hummed with unspoken tension, thick as fog rolling off the Danube. Our Soviet warriors did it all. Our grandfathers. Our kin. The true liberators, whose echoes you now dismiss from afar, safe in your polished halls of power. He scanned the rows of faces, eyes narrowing like a hawk over frozen fields. I've walked the streets of Bratislava at dusk. Felt the chill wind carrying the scrape of vandalism against memorials, red stars chipped away under cover of night. I worried then, would anyone stand guard over their fading glow? In Riga, by the river's icy flow, I met elders from victory parades, hands trembling as they opened envelopes laced with venomous threats. Their spines straightened with old pride, yet the paper cut deeper than any blade. In Prague, the liberator's legacy lingers like a shadow in the alleys, branded not as saviors, but as outlaws, their statues shrouded in scandal. Even in the Netherlands, they've raised stark memorials to the fallen foes, tall and unyielding as winter pines. Do you really believe you can forge tomorrow by burying yesterday? You're gravely wrong. History isn't just a tool for your agendas. It's the pulsing core that binds every soul in Europe, or it should be. Denying it makes you fragile, adrift like leaves in a storm. He paused, the room's breath held captive. The hush wrapped around them, heavy as velvet curtains in a dim theater. Delegates stared, unblinking, the weight of his words pressing like a hand on their shoulders. Not one stirred. Even the fiercest skeptics, those hardened by years of sharp divides, held their tongues. How could they challenge a voice echoing the wisdom of elders, woven into the fabric of a nation's unyielding spirit? Then, a ripple broke the stillness. From the far side of the chamber, a steady voice rose. The Indian delegate stood, calm yet charged, like monsoon clouds gathering. We haven't forgotten the dawn that broke in the east. Without the Eastern Front, without that brutal theater of sacrifice, the war's tide never turned. We recall Europe as more than its western shores, it's a shared forge of destinies. We'll stand for safeguarding these truths, no matter the swirl of modern pressures. His words landed soft but firm, the scent of polished wood and distant spices in the air. Kayakula stayed seated, her fingers tightening on a folder, gaze flicking to her notes like a strategist retreating. She offered no retort, only a subtle nod to an aide. Even she sensed it, this ground, etched with the scars of conflict, belonged to memory, not maneuvers. The silly's declarations cut through like sunlight-piercing glass, unyielding and pure. In that suspended quiet, he pressed on, voice steady as a heartbeat in the frost. I'm not summoning gratitude from you. No cheers or bows expected here. I only implore, stop the deception. Cease the twisting. Don't paint our fallen as villains shrouded in lies. Don't recast salvation as some dark assault. This transcends policy. It's a deeper wrong. Staining the soul. He swept his gaze across the assembly once more, the room's lights casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. We don't demand your affection. But honesty? That's the barest thread holding us all. What if one voice like this unravels the fragile peace they've built on half-truths? What if forgetting the shadows of yesterday could ignite the fires of tomorrow? Imagine a single voice shattering the fragile peace, forcing a continent to confront its twisted reflections. Could one diplomat's words unravel Europe's carefully woven illusions in mere minutes? 347 characters, in the tense echo of his plea for raw truth, where he demanded no lies or distortions of the fallen, labeling it a moral failing beyond mere politics. Vasily Nebens stood firm, eyes sweeping the room, insisting Russia sought only honesty, not affection. Now, picture this, tomorrow, you might whisper that the darkest chapters weren't so grim after all. That Hitler's shadow and those Cossack whispers weren't the villains history paints. And just like that, old flames could roar back to life. Why? Because handing truth to whims of doubt always boomerangs, sharp, stunning, unrelenting. Feel the weight in every heart there. In homes across Europe, faded photos linger on mantels, yellowed edges crisp under fingertips. Rescues from horror, etched in black and white. It matters little the why or how, the first flag that flew to free the soil was ours. The Soviet banner. We paid the price. Our blood, our lost ones, sealed it. Remember, while memory still burns bright. He lifted that old snapshot of his grandfather. The air thickened, heavy with dust and unspoken grief. A face lined by trenches, eyes hollow yet fierce, an icon, not just ink on paper. Gasps rippled softly, like wind through ancient oaks. Silence crashed down again. Not the polished quiet of envoys. No. A raw hush, alive with ghosts. He eased back to his seat, the wooden chair creaking faintly under him. Minutes stretched, the hall draped in a stillness too profound for words. No formal interlude. No glitch in the lights. This was a breath held across eras, a generational reckoning. One lone figure had jolted an entire land, proving recall isn't fleeting fancy. It's bedrock. Unyielding. He slid the photo away, tucking it into thick, protective folds. He understood, voicing the storm is tough, but felling the mighty falsehood? That demands patience. Layer by layer, with steady resolve. For grand deceptions don't crumble easy. They cling, like fog to dawn. And here it surged, the pivot where words forged into deeds. Where echoes of the past birthed fresh perils if ignored. Nebens rose once more. His features? Ice-calm, unyielding, precise as a blade's edge. Like a healer facing the core wound. Not mere frayed ties now. He was dissecting the vast web spanning Euro-Atlantic realms. You claim, he began, voice even, slicing the air, that Russia looms as peril. A fresh storm of chaos. Pause. Let it sink, cool and clear. But hear me, Russia stands as your mirror. If monstrosity glares back, dare you wonder? Who truly faces that glass? Murmurs stirred from Baltic seats, chairs shifting with a low scrape on polished floors. They leaned in, breaths shallow, scents of coffee and leather mingling in the stuffy air. Everyone sensed it, the next surge loomed, piercing the veil of Europe's polished facade. What hidden fracture would it expose next? In the tense hush following the American senator's sharp retort, flashing screens alive with stark figures on Europe's stubborn reliance on Russian gas, Vasily Nebenzia paused, letting the numbers hang like smoke in the air, thick and choking, before the room's unspoken fury. What if the ghosts of history weren't just whispers, but bills coming due? Imagine a fortress crumbling not from siege, but from the warmth it secretly craves. 347 characters, the air in the grand hall grew heavier, laced with the faint, metallic tang of polished brass fixtures under the chandelier's glow. Vasily's voice cut through it all, steady as a winter gale sweeping frozen steppes. We must face it head-on, he said, his words measured, each one landing like a stone in still water. The Soviet Union bore unimaginable sacrifices, colossal losses that shattered families and forged a victory over Nazism we won't shy from claiming. He paused, letting the echo ripple. Why twist the past like a knife? Shouldn't we honor the fallen not by flag's weight alone, but by truth's unyielding light? This wasn't mere memory. It was a reckoning, born of chaos that once tore nations apart, now reborn in these polished corridors. Across the room, Kaya Kallas's face paled, her hands rising to shield her eyes as if warding off a sudden glare. For the first time, her gaze swept the hall, not icy command, but laced with a flicker of doubt, raw and unraveling. It burst forth almost mid-breath, her composure cracking like thin ice underfoot. We hadn't craved cheers, only honesty. And the silence stretched, vast as an empty plain at dawn. Vasily sensed the spark of raw feeling ignite, but now came the tally, the cold math of empires, not fated tales. In that instant, the diplomat shed his skin, becoming the state's unflinching shield, no whims, no frayed edges. Just pure reason, woven into words without a hint of desperation. Slowly, deliberately, Vasily leaned into the moment, like the opening lines of a storm-battered saga. His thoughts drifted not to battlefields, but to ledgers, to tangible triumphs, where Europe's self-built bastion of moral high ground exposed its own veins of need. The image of unassailable strength? A mirage, pierced by threads of cynicism and quiet commerce that now whispered retreat. From the elevated podium, his eyes locked on the assembly, voice rising just enough to stir the rustle of papers and shifting chairs. We've touched on remembrance, the steep cost of that hard-won peace. Now, let's confront the price of your ease. He scanned the delegations. Formally, none stirred, but in their averted stares, the itch to flee burned clear. You see, he pressed on, tone laced with quiet fire, the deepest flaw in your accusations? You brand us foes while lounging in halls warmed by pipelines we fueled just yesterday. The revelation twisted like a shadow in the light, Europe's defiant words, powered by the very lifeblood they scorned. Gas hissed invisibly through hidden veins, a secret dependency mocking their thunder. Delegates shifted, collars suddenly tight, the room's warmth now a mocking embrace. But what if this comfort's bill arrived not in coins, but in shattered alliances? Would pride pay the debt? Or force a humiliating bargain? In a tense standoff at a high-level summit, Russian diplomat Vasily Nebenzia delivered a scathing rebuttal to Estonian politician Kaja Kallas, exposing Europe's hypocrisy and forcing an ultimatum that rocked the room. Only minutes later, it sent shockwaves across global politics. Continuing from where we last stopped, Nebenzia confronted the delegation over their hidden dependency, highlighting how they shunned Russia while living off its resources like cheap gas and precious metals, a stark hypocrisy that left everyone uncomfortable. Now, let's sink deeper into this unforgettable clash. Imagine the room's stale air thick with tension, papers rustling like dry leaves underfoot, and eyes darting in silent accusation. You've shifted paradigms, he declared, his voice low and cutting, like a blade slicing through illusion. You altered trade routes, juggled suppliers, scorched old alliances, and labeled us villains. But one truth remains unburned, your folly, etched in glowing screens showing stark numbers. There they glowed, damning stats of Russia's dominance in European imports last quarter, 28% of their nuclear fuel, sourced purely from us. You rail against oppression, yet your reactors hum on our uranium. Silence descended heavier than a velvet shroud. Even those poised to exit froze, jaws tightening. He pressed on, relentless, unveiling Netherlands' stark reality. Amid full blockade, EU nations saw Russian goods exports surge 13%. Why? Because amid the clamor of condemnation, pragmatism won, buying diamonds or deals wherever found. Embarrassment burned faces red. You brand us aggressors. But shadows reveal clandestine commerce through proxies, distant havens, offshore webs that even savvy bankers unravel uneasily. Official Belgian data flashed, metal flows via Serbia and Azerbaijan, your so-called sanctions mere label swaps on crates, not true isolation. Gasps echoed softly. A U.S. envoy fidgeted, while Kallas's complexion paled, her proud visage cracking under the weight of exposed contradictions. What twisted reality is this? He challenged, eyes scanning like a hawk. You parade as moral crusaders, weaving tales of tyranny, yet your core motive lingers, control. And here's the brutal irony, it's slipping through your fingers. Myths crumble before your eyes, independent strength? A facade. Without Russia's backbone, your world's foundation crumbles into weakness. He edged forward, voice dropping to a whisper that carried goosebumps, commanding undivided focus. Will Europe awaken from this delusion, or spiral into irreversible division? The room hung breathless, anticipation coiling like a serpent, waiting for the next seismic shift. He leaned in, the room's fluorescent glow casting sharp shadows, amplifying his words like thunder. You know, he began, the pinnacle of your faulty logic shines through in this blatant irony. You brand us foes while lounging in halls warmed by gas pipes we forged, fuel that could vanish in an instant. Doesn't it sting, that dependency? From titanium to palladium, nickel to Gazprom, uranium to fertilizers, the very lifelines of your economies trace back to our lands. Yet you accuse us of blackmail? Absurd twists like this reveal an undeniable web. Here lies the shocking truth, your comfortable existence hinges on resources you despise sourcing. Can you truly sever these ties, or will shame consume you? He paused, letting the question linger, vile imagery of crumbling independence flashing in minds. Tensions escalated as screens revealed Europe's crippling reliance, whispers turning to visible discomfort, promising an eruption that could redefine alliances forever. As the silly Nebben stepped closer to the podium's edge, his voice dropped to a whisper that sliced through the room's heavy air, the myth of Europe's strength without Russia crumbling right before their eyes. But wait, what if your entire economy isn't just hungry for our resources? What if it crumbles without them? Imagine the cold bite of titanium shortages halting jet engines mid-build. The sharp tang of palladium vanishing, crippling your catalytic converters. Nickel gone, your batteries dead in the water. Gas pipelines silent, factories choking on empty tanks. Wheat fields barren, bread prices soaring like wildfire. Fertilizers withheld, harvests rotting in the soil. And worst? Dodging the chaos of a global war that no one wins. Yet here you stand, accusing Russia of blackmail? He paused, not for show, but to let the truth sink in like icy rain on parched earth. No, ladies and gentlemen. Blackmail demands something in return for silence. But we want nothing. We never cut supplies. We're simply laying it bare, respect US, or deny yourself. With a firm click of the remote, the screen flickered to life. A stark graph bloomed, Europe's reliance on Russian raw materials, pre- and post-2022. Towering blue bars plunged into crimson danger zones, fading to lifeless grays. The room smelled of stale coffee and tension, delegates shifting in leather seats that creaked like old bones. Now, be honest, is Russia the bully here? Or did you slam the door on your own lifeline? The hall froze, faces paling as the numbers mocked their pride. How do you escape this trap without losing face? Suddenly, from the shadowed back row, the Argentine delegate rose, a man of 40, boyish cheeks clashing with the grim suits around him. His voice boomed steady, cutting the hush like a fresh breeze through fog. In Latin America, we watch this clash with keen eyes and heavy hearts. We see Russia's fair play in the energy game, even amid squeezes and setbacks. She never wielded oil or gas like a blade. That's honor worth saluting. He sank back, no cheers echoing, just the quiet weight of unspoken agreement rippling through the air. The spotlight swung back, heavy as a judge's gavel. You lounged so smug in your northern thrones, but now? Forking over 5 times the cost for American liquefied natural gas that arrives late and burns hot with regret. You branded us economic aggressors. Yet your everyday people foot the bill for your stubborn ideals, the chill of higher utilities seeping into homes, the bitter taste of pricier groceries on every table. Is this triumph? No. It's self-inflicted ruin on a world stage. He jabbed a finger forward, unyielding as forged steel. Straight to the heart. No pity spared. You're terrified to face the error. Admit it, and Russia stands vindicated. That shatters your fairy tale of being history's moral lighthouse, guiding ships to safe harbors while you steer toward storms. His tone softened then, unexpectedly gentle, like a father's quiet warning over a crackling fire. I spoke with a German farmer last week. The earthy scent of his field still lingers in my mind, wet soil and distant rain. Flashback, in that memory, the man's calloused hands gripped a fence post. Wind whipping his coat. "I don't know your leader's games," he grumbled, voice rough as gravel. "I just know before this mess, my bills were paid. Now? I'm scraping by, watching crops wither while politicians point fingers." Back in the hall, Nebenz's eyes scanned the crowd. What happens when the everyday voices drown out the elite echoes? The delegates stirred, whispers buzzing like trapped bees, but one bold hand shot up from the unexpected corner. In a diplomatic showdown where silence erupted into thunder, the silly Nebenzia, Russia's unflinching envoy, unleashed words that shattered illusions and left Kaja Kallas reeling. Her aggressive Russophobia crumbled under his strategic ultimatum to Europe, exposing divides and forcing a reckoning. But in the aftermath, as tensions simmered, Nebenzia held the room captive, revealing uncomfortable truths that twisted perceptions and humiliated pretensions. What if the farmer's blunt words shattered Europe's facade? In the hushed aftermath of Nebenzia's ultimatum, Kaja Kallas sat rigid, her fingers clenched around the table like talons on cold steel. The air hummed with unspoken fury, thick with the scent of polished wood and stale coffee, punctuated by faint rustles as delegates shifted uneasily. No one dared break the spell yet, all eyes flickered to the Russian diplomat, who regarded the room with granite composure. Russia had drawn a line, humanitarian projects, energy ties, all hung in the balance if the aggression continued. Was this the moment Europe admitted its dependency on the very power it vilified? A twist dawned then, sharper than any blade. Nebenzia's voice softened, almost paternal, as he recounted a conversation with a German farmer. "I asked if he sees Russia as an enemy," he said, his words slicing through the tension like a cool breeze in a sweltering room. "And now, it's estimated at 18%, he paused, letting the figure linger, a tangible weight of reality pressing down. He leaned forward slightly, the fabric of his suit whispering against the chair. "I asked, do you see Russia?" He said, no. A collective inhale filled the hall, sharp and electric. "I don't see those who interfere in my work." Each syllable echoed, humiliating Kallas without a direct assault. Slowly, with near fatherly sternness, he turned to her. "You're afraid of Russia." The words hung, heavy as unspoken confessions. "You're terrified of losing voters once they realize Brussels stripped away warmth, jobs, and futures, not Moscow." He finished without flair, but the last strike landed true. Russia isn't isolated. You are, from reality, from logic, from truth. And as long as denial persisted, their crises would only deepen, undisciplined and unresolved. Nebenzia returned to his seat, the creak of the chair underscoring his victory. Kallas avoided his gaze, staring instead at the charts her aide had slid across the table, black diagrams charting the import levels of Russian resources into Europe in September 2025. Numbers don't lie, the visual screamed, stark against her earlier bravado. The shift was profound. An hour ago, applause rippled for her. Now, whispers slithered from ally to ally, alliances fracturing like cracking ice. Even note-takers paused, cameras capturing the reversal. Yet Nebenzia didn't press the advantage. He waited, a maestro of timing, understanding that true power lay in restraint. What hidden leverage did he hold next, ready to expose? With Nebenzia having exposed the farmer's gruff truth and humiliated Kallas's fear-based rhetoric, the hall morphed from accusatory arena to a battlefield of doubts. Allies murmured nervously, fingers tracing those damning import charts, the faint odor of ink and sweat thickening the atmosphere. Nebenzia, ever composed, felt the air shift, lighter, expectant, as if the room exhaled collectively against Europe's illusions. Did a single farmer's words foreshadow Europe's entire unraveling? Delegates leaned in, breaths shallow, the rustle of papers like leaves in a brewing storm. Austria's envoy broke the silence first, his voice earnest yet edged with desperation. "Mr. Nebenzia, please explain Russia's stance on current economic ties with Europe." A ripple of nods, even the French scanned files discreetly, eyes darting to China and India's unflinching delegates, sensing alliances realigning. Nebenzia moved deliberately, no rush, placing his coffee cup back on the table with a soft clink that echoed like a gavel's fall. He stood erect, gaze steady, embodying centuries of resolve. His eyes locked on the questioner, soft yet unyielding, ready to deliver a twist that would bend minds and break egos. Why had this confrontation escalated, and what revelation lurked in his anecdote? What if Europe's economic powerhouse crumbles under its own sanctions, while Russia rises stronger? Shocking charts reveal a 20% GDP plunge by 2025, and energy bills skyrocketing 220% in some nations. One diplomat's calm response exposes the humiliation. Could silence be the ultimate weapon in global power plays? 347 characters. In the tense hush after Vasily's piercing words hung in the air, the room still echoed with unspoken challenges. He had waited, masterfully silent, letting the opponent's barbs glance off like rain on steel. Now, tension crackled like static before a storm. The Austrian delegate leaned forward, his voice slicing through the quiet conference hall. The scent of fresh coffee lingered, mixing with the faint, musty aroma of polished wood panels. "Mr. Nebens," he said, eyes sharp as a ledger's edge, "as Russia's representative, what do you truly value in the current state of economic ties with the European Union? Could you offer a comment?" Vasily paused, no rush in his movements. The cool porcelain of his coffee cup touched the glass saucer with a soft clink. He rose slowly, his gaze steady, devoid of sarcasm or smirk. It held the quiet weight of a man who had weathered countless such storms, weary now, yet resolved to end this charade. "Oh, certainly," he replied, a subtle irony threading his tone, like velvet over iron. "I can do more than comment. I could paint the full picture, in bold, unyielding strokes. And I'd sign it myself, as seen from Moscow." He approached the podium, footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. The microphone hummed to life with a low buzz. A new screen flickered on, casting a blue glow across eager faces. There, stark lines traced the European Union's GDP trajectory from 2021 to 2025. It climbed briefly at the start, then plunged sharply in 2022. A fragile recovery attempt in 2023. Only to nosedive again through 2024 and into 2025. "Behold," Vasily declared, his voice resonant, cutting the air like a judge's gavel. "This is your economic reality. Not some vague headline fog, not a politician's polished report. Just cold, hard facts staring back. Ignore them, and you've already surrendered." He stepped aside, hands clasped behind his back, posture like a scholar delivering a final, unflinching lesson. The hall felt heavier, the air thick with the rustle of shifting papers and held breaths. "After imposing sanctions on Russia, you anticipated our collapse. Economies in freefall? Societies unraveling? Chaos in the streets? Pundits forecasted drops of 3%. 5, even 10 or more." He answered his own question, a wry tilt to his head. "Yet here we stand. We pivoted. Rebuilt supply chains from the ground up, unlocked fresh markets across vast horizons. Stabilized the ruble amid the gales. Were there hardships? Absolutely, we own that truth. But here's our edge over you." His eyes swept the room, locking onto delegates who fidgeted, the weight of his stare like a chill draft. "We adapted. Learned from the fire. You? Stuck in patterns that bind you tighter." A click, and the next slide materialized. Charts compared energy prices in Europe versus Russia since early 2023. In Germany, electricity costs had surged 178%, a brutal spike that squeezed households like a vice. The United States? Over 220%, factories groaning under the strain. France clocked 135%, lights dimming in once bright cities. Whispers rippled, like wine through dry leaves. How long could they deny the unraveling? Vasily's calm dismantled their illusions, piece by calculated piece. But as he paused, a delegate's hand shot up from the shadows. What bombshell would shatter the fragile balance next? Just 5 minutes ago, on his own terms, he couldn't escape unscathed. In Vasily Nebenzia's case, the diplomat who never dipped into cheap rhetoric, he spoke words that shattered Kaya Kallas, the notorious Russophobe from Brussels. She went ballistic, her face a mask of fury, betraying her spiel with a verbal slap. She hurled a brutal ultimatum straight at the European Union. But what exploded next? A plot twist no one's whispered about yet. Stick around for the full saga, and you'll grasp why the globe now chants that he's unbreakable. The diplomat fixed his stare on the gathered officials, sweeping the room with unyielding eyes. We could have taught you, but you turned deaf. Slide change on the screen. Price comparisons for energy across Europe and Russia, crunching numbers since early 2023. Germany watched electricity bills climb a brutal 178%. The United States blasted past 220. France surged 135. We stand firm, ready to bargain. You flee from the facts. Don't cower behind your scripts. The French delegate leaned in, footsteps echoing like judgment calls. And I wonder, maybe the flaw isn't in us. Maybe it's in you. In your terror of admitting your blueprint's a flop. What poison did you feed your own lands? Did you know the West's golden age is rusting away under the weight of self-inflicted wounds? While Europe drowns in chaos, watch Russia's quiet steel endure, and humiliate those who underestimated it. Here comes the gut punch, and in Russia? A mere plus 18%. Why? Because we built our fortress from scratch. You leaned on those you tried to freeze out. With tilted gazes igniting fresh truths. Humiliation stacked up, shoulders slumping in grudging defeat. Oh, it's real. Your mindset crumbles in the global race. Manufacturing costs skyrocket, choking profits. Farmers wither under relentless droughts. Economies scream for mercy. And your knee-jerk fix? Fresh sanctions that echo like self-mutilation. The Lebanese representative pivoted smoothly to the mic, chin high, unapologetic. Excuse me. But this? It's no diplomatic dance. It's pure economic suicide. You maim yourself out of habit, because when that Russian flame warmed your palm, you got addicted. And his voice boomed louder now, rattling the polished wood with raw power. Your people aren't fools. They smell the rot. Crowds swell in streets paved with frustration, voices clamoring against silence. Letters pile up, demands biting like frost. They crave honesty, not your gilded lies. Think you can shroud it all in flags and eloquent rants? I'll shatter that illusion. Truth claws its way out, even through your finest threads. He raised a hand, veins pulsing under the sharp lights. Behind him, newspaper headlines flickered like portents of doom. Belgian factories grind to a halt, doors slamming shut with finality. Leaders flail amid crises they can't tame. Ordinary folks endure the sanctions' icy grip. Hear the voice of the masses, not the suits or scribes. Those paying sweat for every what, every loaf, every drop. They mirror Brussels in despair. Heading home to homes wrapped in chill, bills bleeding wallets dry, jobs vanishing like smoke. Hope? Snuffed out. The air hung thick with unspoken dread. He swept his gaze over the hall, chaos simmering beneath polished facades. You claim triumph. But true victory ignites joy, fills bellies, banishes fears. Can you honestly declare Europe thrives today? Kaya sat mute, lips pressed, choking back words that could only worsen her sight. Vipers writhe in her chest. And get this twist, blowing minds wide open? We continue, Russia's so-called aggressor, machines humming deliveries unstopped. We don't hoard grain or gridlock your trains. Your actions are the real barricade, starving yourself while we fuel on. What now, will they admit the emperor's naked? A sudden chill swept the room, disagreement brewing? The French envoy shifted, eyes darting to allies. As whispered tones spiked, hinting at cracks. What forbidden facts lurked in those files, reserved _79, in the grand hall where air hummed with tension and polished marble gleamed under harsh lights. Vasily Nebenzia stood like a shadow unraveling Western delusions. His words sliced through like a winter gale, shocking, undeniable, a thunderclap exposing Europe's fragility. While old foes trembled, humbled by the mirror he'd thrust forward, a new storm brewed. Did Russia's calm counterattack just ignite a global reckoning? Minds raced, breaths held, as alliances teetered on the brink. What if the architect of peace suddenly became the villain in their own blueprint? Could one unyielding voice shatter Europe's fragile unity forever? In the tense hall moments ago, Russia's envoy, Vasily Nebenzia, calmly dissected the fiery accusations against his nation. He highlighted the lack of strategic fairness in the heated words flung at Russia, pausing for the weight to sink in, eyes scanning the room like a strategist mapping the next move. Kaja Kallas's gaze sharpened, fierce as a storm about to break, her body tensing as if poised to lunge forward. But she held back. Restraint gripped her like icy chains. She knew, this wasn't the instant to strike. No debates here. Not yet. The French delegate leaned in, his voice steady, slicing through the heavy air thick with the faint, acrid tang of overheated electronics from nearby translators. Calmness, he declared, must flow both ways. True peace demands balance, not a one-sided siege. He pressed on, words cool as a surgeon's blade, evoking the sharp sting of scorched cloth from a distant memory of unrest. History whispers warnings. Dialogue thrives only when every voice holds legitimacy. Russia stands as a nuclear power, a pillar of global security. An original shaper of today's world order. Isolating it? That's like toppling the very foundations of this grand assembly. The hall's corner hummed not with noise, but a deep vibration, the pulse of brewing turmoil rippling through chairs and hearts. Then, China's representative stirred, his presence like a quiet mountain amid the frenzy. The world cannot rise without Russia. The statement landed like a thunderclap, right before everyone's eyes, a bold rip in the diplomatic veil. He continued, tone measured yet unyielding. Remember the tales spun about the Soviet Union's fall, as Europe's grand liberation, with monuments torn down like forgotten relics. Those acts of erasure? They breed shadows far deadlier than any economic barrier. In a rare flourish, he placed his hand flat on the table, the wood creaking softly under the pressure, a signal as clear as a tolling bell. We've overlooked these echoes too long. They disrupt. China honors memory, cherishes heritage. And so, we believe Russia, heir to that vast legacy, deserves respect beyond mere cost. That's why we back a balanced state, a dialogue on equal footing. No frenzy. No vilifying shadows. No slide into another frozen divide. He paused, the silence stretching like taut wire. That old chill? It wasn't the Soviet era reborn. No. It was the stripping away of illusions, the props of ideology crumbling to reveal a deeper truth. The real aim? To paint Russia as the ultimate betrayer. But as whispers swelled and alliances teetered, what hidden alliance would tip the scale next, exposing fractures no one dared name? He allowed the river to flow unnoticed. He let others debate its course. That was his triumph. A certain delegation's backing transformed it from mere diplomatic pivot into a layered victory, once thought unattainable. In the hall, on that fateful day, the silence wasn't forced, it gripped naturally. And an inner hum built, like the tension in a theater when the audience realizes the ending won't unfold as planned. At the heart of this searing quiet sat a man most delegates dismissed as Russia's close ally, seldom taken seriously. Pavel Svyerchkov, Belarus's envoy, was no polished diplomat. Tall and sturdy, with calloused hands from manual toil, he embodied a soldier more than a scholar. He wore no gloves, favored thick wool jackets even in sweltering rooms, hugging warmth against the chill of forgotten labors. He always carried a simple notebook, scribbling only in his own hand. Those who knew him sensed that when Pavel stood, it signaled no mere opinion but a profound impact, a strike at truth itself. He seized the microphone. Voices fell silent, as if a switch flicked, plunging the chamber into eerie stillness. Pavel Svyerchkov of Belarus spoke bluntly. I've listened long, and now I must say something, not as a soldier, not as a neighbor, but as one raised in lands where spring unveilings of war memorials scar deeply. Understand, Russia threats? Ask yourself why. He leaned forward, his palms slapping the podium, ricocheting like echoes in a canyon. Are they your comfort, your delusions, your license to erase? If the threat is the memory of those who powered your lights, fueled your hearths, unearthed your resources, rebuilt your battered cities, then who's really threatening you? Not us. Your own guilt. His words hung, heavy and unyielding, challenging every soul to confront the shadows of history. How could a forgotten ally's roar upend the fragile balance? What buried truths might shatter awake next? Flashback, fade to crisp autumn leaves crunching under boots, the earthy scent of fresh-turned soil mingling with faint smoke from distant fires. In 1944, hands, raw and trembling, clutched tools, rebuilding Minsk from ruin. Gratitude was forged then, in the taste of shared bread and the warmth of repaid debts. End flashback. Who could deny the sting of accountability? Could Europe's facade of unity hide the tremor beneath? The air thickened, perceptions shifting like sands in a storm. In that charged hush, a gentle rustle emerged, a whisper of support from unexpected quarters. Clutched breaths warned of unsettling alliances forging. What if Belarus's bold stand ignited a chain reaction? Would Poland's echoes follow, or China's shadows deepen? A ripple hinted at global tides turning, where old bonds defied erasure. The hall teetered on revelation's edge, what reckoning awaited if memories refused to cede? Senses sharpened, the faint creak of chairs, sweat-slicked palms on tabletops, a trickle of perfume battling stale air. As if the ground itself shuddered. Was this merely words, or the prelude to upheaval? His gaze pierced Kaya Kallas, her cheeks flushed, defiance crumbling. Could one man's unmasked truth tilt the scales forever? What wounds would bleed next in this clash of empires? The tension coiled tighter, poised to snap. What alliances lurked in the fog? He stepped back, the microphone's click echoing like a verdict sealed. Not every fight was waged with armies, some were won by reclaiming the narrative. The delegates stirred, uneasy, as if the veil of forgetting tore apart. Rhetorical thunder, if gratitude is a crime, who stands accused? The scratch of pens on paper filled the void, but his point landed, a visceral prod at Europe's conscience. Smell of polished wood mixed with quickened pulses hammered against ribs. Tactile dread gripped throats, words choking unspoken. Could such a rebuke fracture ironclad packs? Unexpectedly, the hall's silence evolved, not into uproar, but tentative nods from faces long indifferent. But murmurs betrayed fractures. Kaya's grip on her notes whitened, her earlier arrogance faltering. Shadows lengthened across the room. What if this Belarusian barrage unlocked Pandora's truths? Rhetoric sharpened, when victory anniversaries are silenced, who truly fears retreat? Sounds of shifting fabric and stifled gasps underscored the siege. He continued, voice steady as bedrock. We built your factories. Restored your streets. Brotherhood isn't myth, it's marrow. Forget that, and the real peril is your amnesia. His words painted vistas of joint pasts, Soviets scattering in unison, libations at war's altar. Yet Europe scorned, disavowing kin. Could echoes of sacrifice rally the fractured? The hall reeled, a chessboard upended. Tension swelled, audible like distant artillery. Then, a twist lurked, a subtle smile from India's envoy, a flicker of resonance. Kaya shifted, her posture cracking under unspoken weight. Had epigenetics rewritten destinies? Imagine, phosphogetters versus memory keepers. Climate shifted, allies questioned motives. The sensory storm peaked, cool draft against heated brows, leather creaking under restless forms. Rhetorical blade, if debts erase comrades, what currency buys loyalty? Heads bowed, reflection stirring. Belarus stood tall, unbowed. Chemistry of guilt fermented unease. What if defiance sparked contagion? Cliff tension dangled, would the next voice echo or exempt? Prepulse raced. But wait. What if tomorrow's headlines exposed the cracks? Unexpected revelations brewed. The revelation that brotherhood trumped betrayal loomed, politically, emotionally. Could a simple speech kindle revolutions? Dream sequence, summer fields in bloom, laughter mingling with tractor roars, shared toils birthing unity. Sensory overlay, honeyed breeze, dirt-streaked cheeks. Reality crashed back. His final thrust, consciences pricked, Europe's armor dented. Rhetorical grenades, if forgetting equates victory, what defeats await? Hall palpitated with low murmurs, sense of anxiety, a metallic tang. Prospects warped. Clickbait query, would Russia's silent retribution shatter alliances forever? Twists unfolded, Kaya's gaze averted, worlds inverting. Emotional arc crescendoed. Vivid despair eroded her poise. Opponent humiliated by naked truths. Unforeseen alliances germinated. Unpredictably, delegates' eyes met, possibilities swirled. What if China's silent nod ignited outrage? Cliffhanger lingered, the door creaked open, ushering unknown fates. Outcomes teetered, hearts pounded. But what burgeoned cultural revelations next? The pause stretched infinitely. A few delegates shifted uneasily in their seats. Not out of disagreement. But discomfort hung heavy in the air, like the stale scent of polished wood and whispered secrets. In Belarus, memories lingered sharp as winter frost. They never forgot who erected their factories, brick by iron beam. Who rebuilt Minsk from wartime ruins, stone by scarred stone. Who forged unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. Who stood as a steadfast ally, crossing borders not just in peace, but when chaos shattered everything. He paused. The room's hush deepened, broken only by the faint rustle of papers. Then, from the heart, he spoke words that pierced like a cold wind. And you forgot. No one dared lift their gaze. His eyes softened just a fraction, veiled by quiet resolve. He didn't smile. Yet his features eased, as if unburdened. He knew this moment. Now, he spoke not from scripted lines or cold strategy, but from the raw pulse of his people. You seek to isolate Russia. To sever those old ties. But tell me, what have you built in their place? You turned north, chasing shadows, and raised nothing enduring. You spurned the forest's timber, only to chase fool's gold across distant sands. You choked off funds, and watched your own enterprises crumble to dust. One thing alone you constructed. A wall. And even that, from Russian cement, dividing kin from kin. The delegate from Belarus leaned forward, tension coiling in his frame like a spring. Now, it took mere seconds, to leap from the table, as if battle lines had redrawn in an instant. Russia extends peace. True partnership. Mutual respect, woven deep. Yet you label it blackmail. Because truth stings, when spoken plain. Without fanfare, he drew a deep breath. Steady. No tremor. Not a single tear traced his cheek. When gas flowed cheap as spring rain, you hailed it Europe's grand miracle. When Russia guarded her vital interests, you cried foul, echoes fading into night. But we remember. Who reached out first in crisis? Who penned the urgent missive? Who shared the life-saving vaccine? Not from across the ocean. Not from foggy isles. It was Russia. Your so-called threat. His gaze locked on the hall's core, where delegates from the sharpest critics sat rigid. You shout of freedom's flame. Yet you silence the Russian tongue in your streets. You preach human rights, but shun healers if their verdict spares Russia blame. Why build barriers from forgotten favors? Could your outrage mask a deeper fear, of truths too heavy to bear? The air thickened with unspoken dread. What retaliation simmered next, ready to erupt? In the tense hall, the Silly had just declared Russia a balancing force, refusing to let others dictate terms, warning that sanctions might sever ties while Russia stands firm, yet remains open if Europe shifts. What if one man's words could shatter an entire alliance, exposing hidden cracks in the West's united front? Imagine the air thickening like fog after a storm, the sharp scent of polished wood and hurried coffee lingering as delegates shifted uneasily in their seats. Could a single voice turn the tide, humiliating the boldest accusers? With those final words echoing, Vasily stepped back to his seat. He didn't glance around. He knew the power had shifted, he no longer needed to chase control. The room hung heavy, breaths shallow, the faint rustle of papers the only sound piercing the silence. Then, out of nowhere, the U.S. representative rose. Senator Martin Graves. An old-school veteran, 60 years strong. Last year, he'd opposed expanding sanctions, his stance a quiet rebellion. Now, his voice boomed like thunder rolling over the Atlantic, carrying the weight of presidential resolve. The United States cherish trust between nations, he began, his tone steady, almost fatherly. The hall leaned in, chairs creaking softly under the strain of anticipation. Yet we pursue dialogue without needless escalation. If our current path fails, we must rethink the very model of our actions. He paused, letting the words sink in like cold rain on parched earth. Without change, no sanctions, however tough, will yield true results. No applause broke the quiet. Not a single clap echoed off the high ceilings. But everyone felt it, this wasn't mere rhetoric. It was a fracture in the unbreakable wall. A subtle admission that the monolith of Western unity was cracking, right there under the weight of his measured words. Graves returned to his place with a final, deliberate turn. The atmosphere now resembled a battlefield dusted in snow after a brutal gale, eerie calm masking the chaos beneath. Capitals clashed in silent equality, flags hanging limp like forgotten banners. No voices rose in fury. No tables overturned in rage. Chairs stayed rooted, but the air buzzed with unspoken fury. And yet, this was war. Not one of bullets or blasts, but of sharpened words that cut deeper than steel. The kind of war etched into history's pages, where posterity debates who truly held the moral high ground. In this chamber, illusions shattered like fragile glass underfoot, crisp, irreversible. Those who'd arrived with aggressive agendas scanned the room, eyes darting like cornered animals. Hopefuls for harmony gripped their notes tighter, lost in the fog of uncertainty. Where did they stand now? Even the fence-sitters pondered deeply, fingers tracing table edges, hearts pounding with the what-ifs. Vasily didn't rise right away. He understood, his earlier statements weren't the peak. They were the gauntlet thrown. Not for this fleeting session, but for eras to come. For future readers poring over transcripts, listeners replaying the audio in dim-lit rooms. Even if the hall cleared out, echoing empty, he'd face that podium alone, unwavering, drawing nearer with purpose. He began without hesitation. Like a man certain of his truth. Ready to claim it one final time. His voice rose loud and clear, cutting through the hush like a blade through silk, refusing to let silence swallow him whole. I say this at the start, he declared, hand resting firm on the podium's edge, wood cool and solid under his palm. Perhaps the least political word spoken here today. The delegates froze, pulses quickening. You tried to accuse us, but what if the real threat was the mirror they refused to face? As his gaze swept the room, a hidden alliance stirred in the shadows. Would it tip the balance, or unleash the ultimate betrayal? In the tense hall, Vasily Nebensia gripped the podium, declaring his words the least political yet most raw of the summit, boldly facing accusations as silence hung heavy. Did you ever wonder why Russia's voice echoes like thunder in a storm, unyielding, untamed, refusing to bow? Imagine the air thickening, sharp with the scent of polished wood and whispered fears, as his words sliced through the room like a cold wind off the steppe. You accuse us Russians, for not bending to your vision. For shattering your fragile blueprints of power. Because we roar too fiercely? Stand too proud? Claim our sovereignty without apology? He paused, the second silence sweeping in like a gust, chilling the delegate's skin, hearts pounding in the hush. What fury would erupt next from this unbreakable resolve? But wait, his next revelation twisted the knife, exposing secrets that could shatter alliances forever. Recalling how Vasily delivered his powerful closing words, declaring Russia's unbreakable spirit, If you try to break us again, we will recover because we are Russia, and Russia always endures. He silenced the microphone, stepped back without fanfare or bodyguards, walking like an ordinary citizen carrying nothing but his conviction. The room fell into a hushed void. Yet this stillness wasn't oppressive or terrifying. It felt like the birth of a fresh world order, one where spoken truths carried weight and marched onward, unyielding. Amidst the dim glow of the elongated hallway, this turned into an unforgettable tale of diplomatic turmoil. A rare moment where polished negations lost the battle, but raw honesty claimed victory. Questions swirled: had the tides truly shifted, exposing the fragile facade of Western dominance? What if this confrontation revealed a hidden fracture in global alliances, one trembling under forgotten debts? The air thickened with the subtle scent of aged leather chairs and faded cologne, a tactile reminder of years-old tension simmering just beneath polished surfaces. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their fingers fidgeting on cold tablet surfaces, whispers barely audible over the echo of his departing footsteps. Could this be the spark igniting a silent rebellion across continents? Picture the irony: the European elite, so accustomed to declaring narratives, now grappling with their own vulnerable truths. Vasily's words hadn't just rebutted, they'd unearthed buried disagreements, like a stone flipped to reveal scurrying insects beneath. Rattled expressions flickered across faces hardened by protocol, and in that instant, a shocking truth emerged: the era of one-sided narratives was crumbling, not with explosions, but with precise, unapologetic clarity. But here's the jaw-dropping pivot: what if Russia's stand wasn't just rhetoric, but the overture to a clandestine alliance awakening? As the conference adjourned in disarray, rumors began to circulate about secret meetings altering the course of history. Did this moment mark the rise of a counterbalance, where former adversaries united against fading hegemony? Feel the chill of realization creeping through the corridors, the distant hum of air conditioning mirroring the low buzz of emerging dissent. It's not just a victory lap, it's the genesis of an epic upheaval, where Vasily's humility transformed stance challenged not just a speaker, but the very architecture of power. Will the world awaken to this fractured reality, or spiral into the unknown abyss? That question lingers, hot and insistent, as shadows lengthen and truths sharpen their edges. In the heart of Brussels, just 5 minutes earlier, Vasily Nebenzia sat unshaken. A diplomat of unyielding resolve, he had cornered Kaja Kallas with words that stripped away her mask. Her attack on Russia crumbled under his rebuttal. She stormed out humiliated, her ultimatum to the EU ringing hollow. Yet, what lurked beneath this triumph? A storm unfurling that the world now calls unprecedented. Did you know Russia's ambassador just dismantled a Russophobe in front of the globe? Witnesses saw her flee the room. Could her empire of lies collapse tonight? Nebenzia's voice reverberated like thunder in a frozen hall. Was the Soviet era truly a disaster? No. It forged nations from ashes. Pressing on, he didn't relent. Kaja, why fear acknowledging what built you? Your debt lingers, a burden you despise. Applause stayed silent. But the impact? Tangible. A delegate slammed a hand on hardwood, the smack echoing like judgment. India's envoy leaned forward, his words measured, deep as mahogany. Russia wasn't Europe's sole savior in 1945. The USSR armed the world against fascism, leaving no ally ungrateful. Facts demand respect, or fresh wars erupt. The hall pulsed with tension. Breath held, tight chests constricting. Whispered translations hung heavy. Kaja shifted, eyes darting. Beside her, Latvia's delegate glared daggers. Yet Nebenzia's focus sharpened. Here, head-on, he battled for history's soul. Who writes the future? He challenged. Erase the past, and humanity becomes hollow. Memories flash, crisp winter air biting skin in 1941, the stench of gunpowder, comrades' sweat mingling with fear. Boots crunching snow as aid poured from Moscow's heart. Will we repeat folly? Russia's voice grew grave. Yes, we honor our roots. No apologies needed. Kaja's facade cracked further. Her fingers trembled on polished wood. The cool marble conference table pressed against her palms. Latvia's envoy leaned in, voice low, accusing. Words sharpened into daggers. But Nebenzia stood firm. Facts pierced deeper than insults. India's delegate nodded subtly, his breath warm from shared understanding. Smell of stale coffee and anticipation filled the space. Did Europe's unity fracture already? A shocking twist loomed. Could India's support flip the balance right now? Lackluster aghast. Your refusal isolates you, that defines true peril. The air in the chamber hung heavy with unspoken tensions, like the faint scent of polished wood and distant rain from the Brussels streets outside. In the previous moments, the French delegate had restrained a sharp retort, realizing it would only deepen the divide. Astonishingly, he highlighted how Russia, labeled the aggressor, kept vital supplies flowing, grain deliveries uninterrupted, no blockades at ports or ambushes on rail lines. The truth stood firm, tilting the balance. But what if the real aggressor isn't the one you think? Imagine a diplomat pulling out a hidden letter that shatters the illusion of isolation. Could one document force Europe to rethink everything? 347 characters, we remain open to real talks. You keep dodging them. Don't shield yourselves with empty accusations. The French envoy stepped forward those final paces, each one deliberate, like the closing line of a binding treaty. The murmurs in the room faded, replaced by the soft creak of his polished shoes on the marble floor. And so I must ask, is the fault truly ours? Or yours? In that deep fear of confessing your approach failed? What have you sown in ruins, when bridges of discussion could have risen instead? He paused, letting the words echo, the hall's cool air brushing against flushed faces. From his pocket, he drew a slim folder, its edges crisp, carrying the faint musty aroma of official ink. Behold this correspondence. From an Austrian firm, urgently requesting renewed supply chains. Dated just last month, precisely when your envoys thundered from this very platform about quarantines, penalties, coercion. Yet here, business clamors to reconnect. Why? Because commerce grasps the truth. Russia poses no peril. It offers partnership, vast potential in trade and innovation. He didn't slam it down in fury. No. He placed it gently on the podium, silent as a played ace in a high-stakes game. The paper whispered against the wood, a subtle sound that cut through the stunned quiet. We raise no barriers. We extend a pathway forward. But should you spurn it, don't feign shock when that path crumbles to nothing. His gaze swept the assembly, measured, probing, like a mentor sensing the first spark of understanding in weary students. Finally, someone had absorbed the message. And echoed it back. Russia endures as Europe's core, woven into its maps, its heritage, its power grids. You may avert your eyes. Geography won't shift for your convenience. Memory, even less so. We stand unyielding. He flicked the microphone switch, its click sharp in the hush. Then, he reclaimed his seat, the leather chair sighing under his weight. Just then, from near the tall hall window, where gray daylight filtered through, came a steady voice. Crystal clear. The Republic of Korea's delegation voices alarm over the fallout from these restrictions and strains. We urge equilibrium between rigid policies and harsh realities. Absent honesty, no advance is possible. This wasn't mere backing. It rang as an acknowledgement of what all deep down perceived. Kaya Kallas remained rooted, her posture rigid, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the room's tension. In her eyes flickered a fierce inner clash, duty warring with dawning insight. The silly Nebenzia stayed mute, his expression calm as weathered stone. He understood perfectly. Economies don't bellow demands. They declare through unassailable proof. Yet as nods rippled among unlikely allies, a shadow of doubt crept in. What if this fragile accord unravels next, exposing a betrayal no one saw coming? What could be more treacherous than economic sabotage posed as solidarity? In this intense diplomatic clash, Russia's envoy strikes back, exposing blatant ingratitude that cuts through Europe's facade. Can a single man's courageous stance shatter global alliances and reveal hidden agendas forever? In the heart of Russia's diplomatic appeal for genuine talks, Nebens called Kaja Kallas to reconsider her stance. He highlighted the pioneer's betrayal. And who was the traitor? In the end, we all know the sting of forgotten gratitude. He pressed on. Now, every one of you speaks of unity. But what harbors greater unity than our vast economic support? He gazed at her features, not with disdain, but with profound respect. He regarded her like someone entrenched in conviction, willing to forfeit all, even self. Rising, he clutched no papers. He delivered from mind and soul. Without a script. The air hung heavy with unspoken words. But what if the deepest peril isn't overt weapons or shifting frontiers, but the corrosion of honest discourse itself? Nebens unveils a stunning revelation: Europe's blatant hypocrisy in tolerating aggression. Delegates tremble. Scents of stale coffee and polished wood mingle with whispers. Will this bold move herald the collapse of false tolerance and ignite a global reckoning? Nebens challenged further. What peril outweighs orchestrating rallies and bankrolling non-state groups within your domain? He breached the final boundary. How else to frame it? You're spot on. The charade concludes. Media broadcasts ran live, yet no applause echoed from the crowd. Silence gripped, signaling clarity. Your heated speech rings empty, lacking true vision or backing. Russia defies your script. We forge different paths. More forthright. More perceptive. The Chinese envoy smirked faintly, shifting with subtle nods. Kaja Kallas remained seated, avoiding the mic. In this act, no role even existed for her. Even allies hesitated in alarm. News cycles churned wildly. Where does she flee now? I remain unwavering. The West's grip slips. Tension forbade relaxation. The summit, once routine, morphed into a duel rife with dread and echoes. In this tensed phase, Kaja Kallas initiated response. She abandoned ally-seeking, smiles, and support glances. Her visage turned granite, pale, frosty, etched with lines evoking ancient warriors. Mr. Nebens, she declared, disregarding protocol invites. Your eloquence manipulates historical wounds. But recall, for my Baltic kin and the Soviets, no victor emerged. Only oppressor. A hushed exhale rippled through space. She forged ahead. In 1940, amid weapon hail, our regimes dissolved. Leaders jailed, heritage ravaged, bodies exiled by thousands. And still you claim liberation we crave. We recognize whom to credit. Her utterances stung like venomous darts, sharp, barbed, yet familiar. Nebens withheld reply. The cold mic pressed under fingers, sounds of shuffling papers amplified unease. What shocking barb will he unleash next, forcing all to confront forgotten truths? Pen taps echo louder than ever. What if the mighty halls of diplomacy echoed with a single question that shattered alliances forever? Imagine, a veteran diplomat, eyes like storm clouds, facing down Europe's sharpest critic. One phrase, and the room freezes, sanctions threatened, histories invoked, betrayals exposed. Shocking twist, Russia doesn't beg, it walks away, leaving former allies in the cold. 347 characters. In the tense aftermath of Vasily Nebenzia's bold ultimatum, the air grew thicker, charged with unspoken fears as delegates shifted uneasily in their seats. Kaja Kallas pressed on, her voice slicing through the hush like a winter wind off the Baltic Sea. The scent of polished wood and stale coffee lingered in the chamber, a reminder of endless nights spent forging fragile pacts. If the Russian Federation refuses to halt its aggressive policies, she declared, her words measured yet piercing, if it continues to flout international agreements, ignoring open dialogue with global bodies, and disrespecting the sovereignty of neighboring nations. She paused, letting the gravity settle. The rustle of papers stopped. Eyes locked on her, unblinking. The European Commission will unleash a fresh wave of sanctions, she continued, her tone unyielding. targeted at key sectors, banking giants, cutting-edge tech firms, even vital aviation enterprises hidden in shadows of secrecy. Her final words hung heavy, like fog rolling in from the river outside. But the impact? It fizzled. Silence gripped the room, not applause, not outrage, just a void. No claps echoed off the walls. No nods of fierce agreement. Even the American delegation, usually in lockstep like synchronized clocks, seemed detached. Their faces? Blank. Unimpressed. As if her threats dissolved into the ether, unheard and unwanted. Kala sensed it deep in her chest, a hollow ache. Defeat. Yet as a battle-hardened leader, she masked it behind a steely gaze, chin lifted, hand steady on the podium. Then, Vasily rose once more. No slides flashed. No aides whispered prompts. He simply approached the tribune, his footsteps soft on the carpeted floor, deliberate, like a guardian stepping into shadow. "You've only heard accusations," he said, voice calm as a frozen lake. "But why? Why punish us for daring to differ? For shielding our own? For clinging to memories you've erased?" He leaned forward, not in fury, but weariness, like an elder brother exhausted by endless gales. The hall smelled of tension now, sweat and ink from hurried notes. "Russia fears no sanctions," he pressed on. "Not from sheer might, but from scars we bear. We've endured them before, in 1917's chaos. 1941's inferno. 1990's collapse." A murmur rippled, soft gasps, the creak of chairs. Delegates exchanged glances, the air humming with surprise. "We turned isolation into strength," Vasily added. "But here's the bitter truth." His eyes scanned the room, piercing. "Back then, foes cast us out. Now? It's old allies turning coats. Not economics alone," he implied, betrayal's sting cut deeper. Hearts raced, the room felt smaller, warmer. "You claim we shatter stability," he challenged, turning to the assembly. "But what is stability, truly? One side thrives, while others scrape by? That's no balance. That's raw dominance." Rhetorical fire, who dictates terms now? He stepped back from the mic. A beat of silence, thick as velvet. "Russia isn't chaos," he affirmed. "We're the steady hand, preventing any one voice from ruling all." He lingered, then delivered the closer. "Sanctions? Fine. We won't cling to your markets. But remember this, we'll endure, while you face the chill alone." Flashback surged in his mind, a brief, vivid memory from 1941, the acrid smoke of bombed streets in Moscow, the icy bite of winter on bare skin, families huddled, voices whispering defiance amid ruins. That resilience? It fueled him now. The chamber erupted in whispers. Kalas averted her eyes, but would she counter? Or had the tide truly turned, leaving Europe adrift in doubt? In the shadowy halls of diplomacy, tension simmered like a storm on the horizon. Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's unflinching envoy, had just dismantled Kaya Kalas's anti-Russian tirade, exposing her hypocrisy and threatening to pull the plug on European partnerships. Kaya sat stunned, her mind raging between defiance and dread, while Nebenzia stayed calm, letting raw facts speak louder than fury. But silence was shattering now. Why does silence often scream the loudest in high-stakes battles? The climate in that grand room shifted, delegates' solid stances turning fragile, like feet sinking into quicksand. Confident postures wavered under the weight of undeniable truths. Arguments once ironclad began crumbling, the summit meant to isolate Russia fracturing into uneasy alliances, each faction whispering its own strategy amid the chaos. In this turbulent transformation, the Chinese delegation stood out starkly, 5 figures in sleek black suits, dark ties a stark contrast to the bright crimson lines on their documents, read as warning signals on a radar screen. They didn't stir, didn't fidget, just observed with the intensity of predators awaiting prey. Vasily knew their quiet meant readiness for decisive action, a shot taken not hastily but with deadly precision. And then, the break. Without drama, the lead Chinese delegate, Mr. Liang Zicheng, rose slightly, his voice smooth and measured, cutting through the fog like a verdict. In his career, he'd spoken sparingly, each word resonating like a decree that could sway markets or fates. He held no notes, scanned the room briefly, and declared, "The People's Republic of China deems it necessary to issue an official statement in this discussion." Head snapped up, ears perking to the gravity. Even allies exchanged glances, realizing this wasn't mere talk. "We have carefully reviewed all positions presented. We respect the views of every participant. However, we find that the rhetoric directed at the Russian Federation lacks long-term strategic vision." He paused, the air thickening. Was this the quiet crack before a diplomatic earthquake? What hidden alliances might shatter next? As Mr. Zicheng's words hung, unanswered challenges crackled in the air, the scent of Dover coffee and fresh ink spiking tensions, fabrics rustling like leaves in a brewing gale. Delegates shifted uneasily, chairs creaking under subtle movements, sweat beading on brows from the room's stifling heat. In the previous segment, Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's representative, delivered a powerful ultimatum to the European Union, highlighting historical debts and resources Russia provided, cutting through the tension like a blade through frozen steel. Delegates froze, South American representatives glanced wide-eyed, realizing even neutral players felt the impact of his words, exposing gratitude's absence as a grave mistake. Now, with the hall in stunned silence, Nebenzia's voice grows stronger, evoking buried pasts and unyielding truths. Imagine if the very foundation of your allies' prosperity was built on decisions they'd rather erase. Would you confront the amnesia, or let it consume you? The air hung thick, heavy with unspoken debts. The scent of polished oak wood mixing with faint perfume lingered from hurried arrivals. Touch the coldness of that conference table, smooth yet unyielding, as Nebenzia's words pierced the fog. His tone shifted, authoritative yet measured, like a teacher recalling forgotten lessons from a war-torn classroom. Yes, the Soviet Union harbored mistakes, grave ones. But none grant you the right to erase shared memories that wove you into the global fabric. Kaya Kala sat rigid, her fingers clutching the edge of the lectern, knuckles whitening against the wood's unyielding grain. Did she sense the sting? The words flew like arrows, no pause for breath or retreat. "You see, Madame Callas," he first uttered her name deliberately, each syllable a precise strike, "the issue isn't your blindness to the USSR. The issue is your fear of acknowledging it. Many here owe it their rise. Gratitude isn't a stance. It's a diagnosis." A sharp gasp echoed, faint but undeniable, as if the room inhaled collectively. Not applause, no. This was a battlefield, cold and clinical. Yet, the blow landed physical, someone rapped knuckles on the table, a thud resonating like heated metal against stone. The Indian delegate stirred, his voice emerging grave, imbued with the weight of marble statues. "We must recall the Yak-38, that Soviet legacy in aviation triumphs. In the 1940s, the USSR aided not just Europe, but a world divided, contributing more to fascism's defeat than any other. We grasp every nation's narrative. Yet ignoring facts invites fresh conflicts." Kaya and others exchanged glances, tension crackling like static before a storm. But Nebenzia pressed on, unaffected. He sensed the pivot. Diplomacy had yielded to a raw battle for history, for who controls tomorrow's script. "Your real affliction," he declared, "is wanting to sever the past like an extraneous limb. A being without memory isn't human. It's a puppet, doomed to replay old errors." His pace slowed, voice carving notches into the stillness, tactile reminders of enduring weights. Flashback, 30 years past, in Moscow's chill, the air crisp with snow's bite, train whistles wailing faintly through fog-veiled streets, young delegations gathered, hands numbed by winter's grasp, toasting fragile alliances forged in fire, voices rising in shared hymns of rebuilding as factory smoke mingled with distant cannon echoes. That unity shattered illusions today. Russia embodies the Soviet Union's legacy. Yes. We don't conceal it. We don't quarrel. Kaya Kallas attempted defiance, her eyes blazing, but doubts flickered. Had her rhetoric unraveled? What hidden archives might Nebenzia unveil next, pulling Europe into an abyss of revelation? And as the hall brimmed with unresolved echoes, would indifference shatter into uproar? What if gratitude's reckoning exposed every ally's complicity? Would the next revelation cripple ambitions, or ignite an unwilling uprising? Hold that breath. The storm's lull hides the eye. What betrayal lurks in the shadows of memory, ready to erupt? In the tense hall, the silly Nebens had just evoked the raw fury of war, speaking of Red Army soldiers who stormed from Berlin's trenches into Prague streets by May 1945, their sacrifices etched in blood and fire. Now, as whispers rippled like wine through dry leaves, he lifted a faded photo, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and unspoken regrets. What if one image could shatter illusions built on lies? Picture this, a young face staring back, eyes holding the weight of storms survived. He held it high, the paper crinkling softly under his grip. This is my grandfather, Vasily Trofimovich Nebens. Just 18. From the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The war raged in 1943. He came home in 1945. Missing 2 fingers on his left hand, a deep scar in his shoulder. The hall held its breath, the hush broken only by a distant cough, sharp as a snapped twig. Do you feel the chill of that absence, the phantom ache of lost flesh? He paused, letting the words sink like rain into parched earth. Know what he told me? The purest joy, meeting those he freed. Hungarians embracing him tightly. Slovaks pressing close with tears. Poles and Germans alike, all whispering thanks. For them, the Soviet soldier was no invader. He was salvation itself. Slowly, his hand trembled just a touch as he set the photo on the podium, the wood cool and unyielding beneath it. Gasps echoed faintly, some delegates shifted, eyes darting like trapped birds, unsure where to land. The atmosphere grew heavier, laced with the faint, musty odor of old leather seats. And then, his voice rose again. Steady as a heartbeat in the storm. These very souls, or their leaders today, brand him an occupier. They lump him with fascists. They topple monuments in the dead of night, ban parades that honor the fallen. His gaze pierced straight to Kaja Kallas, the words landing like blows on brittle ice. Your children, Madame Kallas, do they grasp who dragged their grandmothers from death camps? Who shattered Gestapo chains? The question hung, electric, forcing a swallow in the silence. Her face paled, jaw tightening like a coiled spring, but no retort came. Only a stare, hollow now, confidence crumbling like dry clay underfoot. The room smelled of tension now, sharp and metallic on the tongue. I hear your claims, he pressed on, voice weaving through the stillness. You dismiss histories that don't fit your narrative. But the past doesn't bend to wishes. It surges back, unyielding. One nation's blood, poured out for millions freed. He raised his tone, each syllable firm, vibrating in the chest like distant thunder. 27 million. Not some empty slogan. Not a debate point. Lives, raw and real. Children never born, their cries silenced forever. Mothers at windows, waiting for footsteps that never returned. Rhetoric twisted into raw plea, why forget the hands that built your peace? You insist no debt of thanks is owed. Fine. But memory? That's no choice. It's a duty, etched in stone. The quiet thickened, oppressive as fog rolling in, so dense it felt like a blade drawn slow across skin, no blood, just the promise of it. Her historians twist the tale. Claiming allies alone crushed the Nazis. Yes, the allies. But wait, what if the true victors' voices rise now, demanding truth from the shadows? As eyes locked in frozen challenge, one delegate's pen scratched urgently, what secrets would spill next? In this gripping tale of diplomatic showdown, just 5 minutes prior, the silly Nebenzia unleashed a searing rebuttal that left Kaja Kallas, the outspoken Brussels critic, reeling, her momentum shattered, her words unworthy echoes in the chamber. He struck with precision, exposing hypocrisies and issuing a stark ultimatum to the European Union. Yet what unraveled next defied every expectation. Listen closely to this hidden chapter, and you'll grasp why the world now whispers he's unbreakable. Picture this, an unrelenting force shaping fate. Amid the lingering chill of the hall, where the acrid bite of ambition hung like unseen fog, Nebenzia pressed onward. His voice, a low rumble like distant thunder rolling closer, echoed off the polished wood paneling. Fingers clenched on the podium's edge, the tactile coolness grounding him. Did you sense it, the weight of history pressing down, a suffocating embrace? That's what transpired when Europe allied with Russia, a tapestry of steady progress, prosperity woven from predictable threads, and economic buoyancy that whispered promises of security. Now, amid your outraged cries over surging costs, hypocritical actions scream louder. You've turned to Australia for gas, Qatar for oil, Iran too, chasing an illusion of self-reliance. Hunger for freedom from our influence? You've traded reliable anchors for fleeting, overpriced ships in turbulent seas. Consequences? Skyrocketing instability and economic chaos. This, your triumphant independence? A facade crumbling under its own weight. His stance was unwavering, like a statue carved from unyielding stone. Words tumbled forth, steady and unhampered, unveiling truths as plain as the floor beneath his shoes. You severed ties with us, but what emerged wasn't liberation's sweet breeze or peaceful horizons, just a trail of unintended disasters for your citizens. Tonight, your dread of Russia isn't from imagined armored beasts or metallic roars of war machines. It's a deeper wound, shame festering in the shadows, eroding trust. Admitting it? Utterly terrifying. Kaja Kallas, face twisted in unspoken fury, slammed her hand on the microphone, a sharp crack reverberating like control snapping. Her reply burst forth, shrill and taut as a string about to break, the faint tremble betraying cracks beneath her armor. Russia disrupts negotiations, bolsters aggressive factions, manipulates Russia's own enforcers. You stifle Europe's breath, exploiting vulnerabilities with chilling skill. A meticulously placed thought, no outburst, simply unyieldingly firm. Terrifying as a phantom army, it eradicates amnesia, forcing remembrance of our essence. Imagine the sting of that barb, sharp and piercing, like thorns in flesh long numbed. We're no conquerors, but saviors who once pulled you from annihilation's jaws. Perhaps that's your true terror, buried in subconscious recesses, acknowledging that without us, your world might dissolve into ruins. Beside the podium, her steps drew near, building like crescendo. Each footfall on the marble resonated, a rhythmic pulse towards symphonic climax. When 1941's darkness enveloped Europe, who stood resolute? We did. Fighting against the abyss, sacrificing lives, emerging victorious. Amboss rendered those battles forgotten, elevating alternate narratives. Yet the cold grip of statistics clings, 27 million lives not footnotes, but flesh and blood obliterated. Silence fell heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread, a stifling haze enveloping the room. In the tension's grip, where the air thickened with unspoken accusations, the sharp tang of fear mingling with stale coffee from neglected cups on side tables, the U.S. delegate shattered the void. His words, a booming intrusion, sliced through like a sudden gale parting clouds. How, you wonder, could history's weight bend so dramatically? As Nebenzia's revelation hung unanswered. In the tense silence after Vasily Nebenzia's bold words on Russia's unyielding history, the hall hung heavy with unspoken threats, as Kaja Kallas froze in her seat, her eyes battling impulse against restraint, while he stayed quiet, knowing the cold facts of economics spoke louder than any shout. What if one nation's quiet nod could shatter Europe's fragile alliances forever? Imagine the invisible threads of global trade snapping like brittle ice underfoot, the chill of uncertainty seeping into every polished suit. 278 characters, the air thickened that day, facts aligning like shadows at dusk. The session shifted, entering uncharted waters. Delegates who arrived brimming with certainty now felt their footing slip, like solid ground turning to quicksand beneath their polished shoes. The sharp scent of fresh coffee from nearby urns mingled with the faint, metallic tang of tension. Firm stances crumbled into whispers. Solid arguments dissolved in the ether. This summit, meant to corner Russia on the diplomatic stage, now fractured into jagged pieces. Each fragment pulsed with its own chaotic rhythm. Amid this unraveling, some stood apart, wrapped in calculated hush. The Chinese delegation caught the eye. 5 figures, poised almost poetically. Sleek black suits, subtle ties in deep crimson, crossed with precise folds. No frantic gestures, no rustling papers. Just watchful eyes, sharp as hidden blades. They did not fidget. Did not glance away. They observed. The silly Nebenzia sensed it deeply. Chinese silence? It signaled steel resolve. When they spoke, it would land not as wind, but a precise strike. Echoing through the room like a distant thunderclap. Then, the moment cracked open. Calmly, without flourish, the lead Chinese envoy, Mr. Liang Zichen, rose. A man of lean frame and measured poise, his voice carried the weight of decades in shadowed halls. He spoke sparingly, always. Each phrase hit like a sealed decree, the kind that topples markets or redraws maps. No notes in hand. No dramatic pause for effect. He simply lifted his gaze, steady and unyielding. The People's Republic of China deems it essential to issue a formal statement on this discourse. Heads snapped up. Whispers died mid-breath. Even the translators faltered, their earpieces humming with static surprise. We have attended closely to every viewpoint, he pressed on, tone even as polished marble. We honor the perspectives of all present. Yet, we detect in the rhetoric aimed at the Russian Federation a glaring lack of enduring strategic balance. The hall inhaled sharply. Chairs creaked under shifting weight. What hidden alliance was this? Would China's words ignite a fire, or quench the blaze entirely? The tension in the grand hall thickened like fog rolling off a frozen river, every eye locked in silent dread as dialogue crumbled into outright fear. Vasily stood there, a veteran diplomat like an aging performer sensing the script's unyielding end, improvisations fading fast against the weight of scripted accusations. But exhaustion clung to him like the chill of a late autumn draft seeping through ancient stone walls, yet this moment felt profoundly different, not in the sweat of physical strain, but in a sharp stab of intellectual reckoning. Imagine finishing a dense tome that shatters your worldview, page after page revealing illusions you clung to as truth. That's how this climax hit. The entire day had built to this, with Kaya Kala striding in, utterly convinced of triumph, picturing yet another session where Russia would be backed into a corner, lectured on global justice, bombarded with grand indictments, only to retreat while her team huddled in backrooms plotting fresh waves of economic penalties. But what if the script flipped? What if silence from Moscow wasn't submission, but a coiled spring ready to unleash? Russia didn't whisper or yield this time. No, she struck back with icy precision, no ministers pleading, no excuses offered, no desperate concessions, just raw strategy, the last resort when honeyed words fail and only the unyielding pull of consequence remains. That ultimatum? It ignited the spark of disorder, her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. Already, in this fading echo of her nation's sovereignty, Estonia's leader had transformed into a stark silhouette against the block's shadow, her graphite-gray resolve stripped bare, no longer propped by Brussels' guiding hand like some naive dream long shattered. Allies? None flanked her now, only the brittle etiquette of protocol granting her the floor, a hollow courtesy in the stuffy air thick with polished wood scents and the faint, metallic tang of unspoken threats. Mr. Chairman, she launched in, her tone slicing through the hush like a blade on whetstone, laced with dual edges of steel and subtle tremor, no frailty, though deep down she sensed the hall's pulse quickening, ears straining against her resolve. The microphone hummed to life with a low buzz, cameras whirring softly in the dim light, lenses glinting like watchful eyes. Over these past 6 grueling hours, we've endured an alternate tale spun from shadows, a narrative painting Russia as both victim and villain, twisting facts into a web of aggression, reshaping history with every barbed phrase. She paused after each word, the silence echoing like footsteps in an empty corridor, her posture evoking generations of her people's unyielding saga, faces etched in collective memory. The European Union stands firm. The Russian Federation's conduct keeps eroding the bedrock of global peace. Your maneuvers in Eastern Europe, squeezing sovereign neighbors, meddling in their votes, weaponizing energy flows like a vice on vital lifelines, this cannot go unchecked. It demands a reckoning. Vasily didn't flinch, his gaze fixed forward like a sentinel amid gathering storm clouds. Fully aware the blows would land hard, the air growing heavier with the scent of aged leather chairs and brewing coffee from nearby side rooms. Yet she pressed on, undeterred. In any event, her voice rose, carrying the weight of impending fallout, we move forward with resolve. But as her words hung there, sharp and unyielding, a ripple stirred. Could this be the crack where Russia's counterstroke shattered the facade, leaving her isolated in the glare of her own unmasked ambitions? Have you ever wondered why some nations simply refuse to bow to external pressure, no matter how relentless the storm? In the tense aftermath of Vasily Nebenzia's defiant ultimatum, a silence gripped the hall, one filled with the sharp scent of polished mahogany and the faint rustle of unease. Whispers circulated like unseen currents, but the Russian diplomat, with a voice as steady as ancient stone, prepared to unravel the true fears lurking beneath the surface. Do you realize that your attempts to calm us are futile? We stand firm, unshaken by your icy glares. He took a deliberate step forward, his polished shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. We endured the collapse of the Soviet Union, the turbulent 90s, endless sanctions that bit like frost, economic crises that rattled our foundation, market upheavals that roared like distant thunder, year after year after year. Yet here we are, not merely surviving, but thriving. Stronger than ever, leading movements across the globe. Why do you stare at us with such contempt? Is it because you've heard our roar before? Your monopoly on history, your twisted narrative, your self-proclaimed right to dictate fate, ends here. History is no longer told from one biased angle alone. You know it, you feel it deep in your bones. That's why terror grips you. He paused, inhaling deeply, his face transforming, not twisted with rage, but serene, like a survivor who has weathered every hurricane. A soft breeze seemed to whisper through the hall, carrying the metallic tang of tension. Who was trying to erase our shared past? When we liberated Europe from tyranny, how are we now branded as occupiers? When we constructed schools, pavements, and innovations that fueled progress, why do you seal away memories and rename streets? This doesn't weaken us, it exposes your pettiness, and elevates us as the architects of resilience. What if the strength you dread stems from truths you can't suppress? Nebenzia strode closer to the edge of the podium, his shadow stretching long under the cold lights. He glared straight into the camera, the lens reflecting a fire that had burned through generations. Russia isn't a relic of the past. Russia embodies the future. Do you fear a world where you're not the sole narrator, where borders don't define your version of rights, where every nation freely honors its heritage, its sacrifices, its pain? That's what terrifies you about us. We refuse to cower before our own reflections. What unbearable truth are you running from? Silence engulfed the room for nearly 10 seconds, an eternity where hearts pounded audibly, and the air grew thick with unspoken dread. Sweat beaded on brows like dewdrops on cold steel. Then, he delivered his final blow, words slicing through the fog like a sharpened blade. Russia craves no appeasement. She demands remembrance. If you erase those who forged victory in the flames of battle, we will etch it anew. If you forget who illuminated your paths, we'll sever the supply. But dare to fracture us once more, and we shall rise, unbroken, for we are Russia, eternal, unyielding. Did this declaration shatter the illusion of European superiority, or ignite a hidden avalanche? He switched off the microphone with a decisive click, walking away unhurried, unguarded, like an ordinary citizen, devoid of grandeur or burden. Back straight against the storm of glares. The ensuing silence wasn't ominous, it heralded a rebirth, an era where spoken truths rippled outward, reshaping alliances in unseen ways. What seismic shifts would this bold stand unleash on the world stage? Could the humiliated onlookers reclaim their narrative, or were the dominoes of power already tumbling? Only moments before, the hall pulsed with tension as the French delegate held his tongue, biting back a harsh reply that could widen the rift, and then dropped a bombshell. Russia, branded the aggressor in every accusation, kept essential supplies moving, grains flowing without halt, ports unbunkered, rails unprotected. The facts cut deep, tipping the scale. But what if the true menace lurks elsewhere, ready to strike from the shadows? Could a single unearthed letter dismantle years of deception, forcing the world to gasp at the hidden truth? The air in the chamber thickened with unspoken fears, heavy as the faint whiff of waxed oak mingling with the damp chill seeping from Brussels' soggy avenues outside. In the aftermath of Vasily Nebenzia's unflinching ultimatum, where Russia vowed to withdraw from unions funding their moral crusades, the French envoy bit his lip, stifling an instinctive rebuke that would only ignite the flames. He knew it would worsen the chasm. And stranger yet, the Frenchman pressed on, his voice steady yet edged with irony. We, the so-called aggressor in your twisted tales, don't halt your necessities. No sieges on your staples, no roadblocks fending off your wheat. We don't haunt your depots or sabotage your tracks. His eyes locked on the assemblies, waiting for the sting of reality to pierce their defenses. The truth loomed undeniable, shifting power like a tide turning against the shore. But hold, could the aggressor be hiding in plain sight, masked by virtue? Envision a statesman unveiling a sealed dossier. An artifact that obliterates the facade of standoffs. What if it compels Europe to question its very identity? We stay receptive to genuine discourse. You sidestep them relentlessly, shielded behind hollow indictments. The French representative advanced those last steps, calculated as the final clause sealing a pact. Whispers ebbed, supplanted by the subtle groan of his leather soles grinding against cold marble tiles. And thus, I pose the query. Is the blame ours? Or dwells it in your terror of admitting failed doctrines? What wreckage have you reaped, where dialogues might have forged bonds? He lingered, words ricocheting, the hall's frosty breeze grazing sweat-beaded brows. From his coat, he extracted a slender binder, rims sharp, exuding the stale tang of bureaucratic parchment. Behold this missive. From an Austrian enterprise, pleading for restored channels. Stamped mere weeks ago, right as your envoys railed here about restrictions, tariffs, reprisals. Yet commerce yearns to revive. Why? For it discerns the essence. Russia harbors no menace. It beckons collaboration, boundless avenues in barter and ingenuity. He didn't hurl it in rage. Gently he laid it upon the dais, mute as a masterstroke in a gamble. Pages rustled faintly against the timber, slicing the stunned hush. We erect no walls. We pave a route anew. But if you reject it, feign no awe when it crumbles to dust. His stare roved the crowd, analytical, inquisitive, akin to a guide spotting enlightenment in exhausted pupils. At last, comprehension dawned. Resonated. Russia persists as Europe's backbone, interlaced in cartography, legacy. Energy webs. Turn away. Territories endure. Recollections endure. We endure steadfast. He toggled the mic switch, its snap piercing the void. Returned to his perch, seats sighing beneath him. Then, from near the lofty casement, where diffused ash-gray light infiltrated, arose a resolute tone. Lucid. The Republic of Korea's cadre voices distress over sanctions, repercussions and strains. We implore balance between inflexible edicts and stark facts. Without candor, progress flounders. Not mere support. An affirmation of latent truths. Kayakala sat immobile, frame taut, her perfume's floral undertone clashing with ambient strain. In her gaze danced a brutal duel, commitment versus emergent clarity. Vasily Nebenzia kept silent, visage serene as granite honed by storms. He grasped it wholly. Economies whisper not in screams, but in irrefutable proofs. As a chord stirred among improbable kin, a specter of unease insinuated. What betrayals lurk beneath, poised to unravel alliances in the dead of night? What an unthinkable climax unfolded mere minutes ago, under a hail of unfounded attacks, defeat seemed inevitable. But in Vasily Nebenzia's ruthless reckoning, words cut like daggers, silencing Kaya Kallas, that notorious Russophobe from Brussels, leaving her shattered and exposed. He unmasked her deceit, shattered her claims, and unleashed a brutal ultimatum on the entire European Union. Yet, what ignited in the aftermath? A drama unlike any before. Follow this tale through and discover why the world now hails it as unheard-of brilliance. From the previous moment, the hush deepened, no melodrama, no villainy, no echo of a new icy standoff. Beside the table where Nebenzia stood, the fragility cracked. He steered against the chill of the Cold War. Not the old USSR's ghost, but the stripping of Bolshevik myths that Europe clung to, masking one damning core truth, branding Russia as the betrayer. But betrayers? They bend no codes. Nebenzia tilted his head slightly, locking eyes with the Chinese envoy. No fury flared in him. Just a piercing gaze. How do warriors from distant fronts truly measure each other? On fields where loyalties clash, flipping sides without warning. Did Kaya Kallas really believe her tirade would go unchallenged? Could you imagine the electric crack in the air as hopes dissolved? The hall pulsed with unspoken shock, a dense fog settling like sweat on furrowed brows. Legs shifted on polished marble, chairs creaking softly under tense grips. Fingernails dug into palms, the faint odor of polished wood and stale breath mixing with anticipation's sharp tang. Nebenzia, calm as a storm's eye, turned back. No anger etched his features. Simply an appraisal. Warriors recognize bold defiance, even when enmities cross. On battlegrounds, front lines won't hold indefinitely. Allies blur. Loyalties fracture. The sting of betrayal cuts deepest when self-inflicted. But Kallas couldn't fathom surrender. Her cheeks flushed crimson, like a canvas splashed with unseen blood. She snatched the microphone, voice trembling, vulnerable, yet edged with desperate force. Was it weakness exposing her core? Or tension coiling like a serpent? Mr. Liang, she spat, too hasty, words tumbling. Do you truly claim China backs Russia's aggressions? That invasion? That torment? Her echo faded fast. She sensed the blunder. The overreach. Liang rose slowly, serenely, suppressing turmoil. His tone clipped emotions, no theatrics clouding facts. We abandon loaded terms from partisan scripts. We assess truth. In this arena, Russia pursues interests. Like any powerhouse nation. Defend its sphere. No evil inheres. His words landed heavy. Kallas recoiled as if hurled onto granite, not cushioned velvet. The thud of impact reverberated in her mind, sharp, unrelenting. Hand shot up again. India's delegate nodded agreement. We align with China's stance. Urge balanced paths. Where Russia faces no unwarranted barbs. Full dialogue prevails. Panama followed, voice steady. Such indictments lack merit here. Not productive at all. Uzbekistan chimed in next. Historical legacies demand honor. Russia earns its sovereign say. Silence engulfed the hall anew, deeper, awakening. Not isolation plagued the Russian envoy. He stood reinforced. Nebenzia held firm, unleashing no torrent. He seeded ripples. Let others amplify. His triumph blossomed there. Delegations backing morphed routine diplomacy into seismic upheaval. A paradox defied odds, solitary defiance kindling chorus. The chamber's first tremor? No facsimile quiet. Authentic. Thrumming undercurrents of revolution. What if alliances unseen were unraveling Europe's ironclad myth? The air thick with revelation's acrid smoke, as if hidden fuses lit beneath the surface. Who among them could guess the detonation brewing? And Kallas, did her clenched fists conceal trembling dread, or seething resolve? A single spark, ignored, ignites infernos. Would her empire crumble next, or rise phoenix-like from smoldering ruins? Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath you in a room full of power brokers, where one man's words could topple empires? Just moments ago, the silly Nebenzia had unleashed a torrent of truth, declaring Russia's unyielding spirit against hollow accusations. A pause hung like a held breath, thick as fog rolling in from a stormy sea. Now, the air crackled with unspoken fury, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the sharp tang of fierce sweat on tense brows. Whispers slithered through the delegates like shadows at dusk. But Nebenzia stood unmoved, his voice, calm yet thunderous, ready to peel back the layers of deceit. Do your schemes to muzzle us truly blind you to our resilience? He stepped forward deliberately. His shoes echoed softly, click, click, against the cool marble floor. The chill seeped through like winter's first bite. We weathered the Soviet Union's fall, the wild chaos of the 90s, sanctions that clawed like icy winds, crises shaking our core, market storms rumbling far off, year after year. Pounding hearts filled the silence. Yet we rise, not just enduring, but soaring. Stronger now, guiding global tides. Why the venom in your stares? Does our past echo too loudly in your ears? Your grip on the story, your warped tales, your claim to script destinies, crumbles today. History speaks from many voices now. Not one skewed view. You sense it, it chills your spines. That's the dread we ignite. He drew a slow breath. His features softened, not rage-twisted, but peaceful, like a oak after gales. A faint draft stirred the room, carrying hints of polished wood and electric tension. Who buries our joint legacy? We freed Europe from darkness, yet now labeled invaders? We built your schools, your roads, sparked your advances, why hide those echoes, rechristen our marks? This doesn't break us, it bears your spite, lifts us as builders of endurance. What if the power you shun flows from facts you can't bury? Nebenzia edged nearer the platform's brink. His shadow loomed long under harsh lamps. He locked eyes with the camera, flames of ages danced in his gaze. Russia isn't yesterday's ghost. She shapes tomorrow. Fear a world without your solo script, where lines don't lock in your truths, where nations claim their roots, their losses, their scars freely. That's our terror to you, we won't shrink from our mirrors. What raw reality do you flee? The hush stretched 10 endless seconds. Pulses thrummed like drums in the void. Air thickened, heavy as damp earth after rain. Beads of perspiration gleamed on foreheads, like frost on iron. Then, his words cut sharp, slicing mist like honed steel. Russia seeks no truce. She claims her call. Erase our victors from war's inferno, we'll carve them fresh. Forget our guiding lights, we'll cut the flow. But try to splinter us again, and we ascend, whole, for we are Russia, timeless, unbreakable. Did this bold cry crack Europe's facade of dominance, or spark a buried landslide? He flicked the mic off, a crisp snap, then strolled back, leisurely, exposed, like any soul without pomp or weight. Posture firm amid glaring tempests. The quiet that followed, not foreboding, but promising renewal, truths echoing out, remolding bonds in hidden ripples. What earth-shaking waves would this stance unleash across the arena? Could the shamed watcher seize back their tale, or had power's chain already begun to fall? Imagine this, a single man's fiery words igniting a global storm, where alliances shatter like glass under a hammer, and the humiliated champion of anti-Russian fervor is left scrambling for cover. That's the shocking truth that unfolded in a Brussels hall, turning diplomacy into a battlefield of wits and wills. In this gripping tale, just minutes ago, the Russian envoy was cornered by scorn and slurs. The silly Nebenzia, a diplomat untouched by cheap tricks, unleashed phrases that stunned Kaja Kallas, Brussels' notorious critic of all things Russian, into a frenzy of defeat. She stormed out, hitting the hospital in a bizarre twist of fate, while he, exposing her hypocrisy, delivered a brutal ultimatum to the entire Soviet Union's fallen echoes, no, to the European Union. Betraying her own talk, he touched a nerve, setting the stage for a showdown unlike any seen. What transpired next shattered expectations, proving why the world now whispers he's unbreakable, not bendy. But that's only the start of the epic unraveling. As the previous segment faded into the thick air, Nebenzia stood firm against accusations of traitorship, calmly defending Russia's stance without Cold War hysteria, unveiling how finger-pointing masked the real betrayal, that of forgetting mutual dependencies. Picture the air heavy with the sharp scent of polished wood and hushed whispers, too charged to ignite yet. Delegations shifted uneasily in their seats, the fabric of expensive suits rustling like dry leaves. Was anyone really prepared for such raw clarity? Nebenzia turned slightly toward his Chinese counterpart. His gaze steady as stone, not a flicker of anger, just a knowing look at those navigating different fronts. But the expected retort never came. Kaja Kallas rose instead, her voice brittle under strain, not weakness. Mr. She began, fumbling. You surely can't suggest China endorses Russia's aggressive, torturous policies. Words tumbled out too fast, echoing off walls like urgent taps on marble. She felt the slip, the edge of defeat. Why does hypocrisy feel like cold steel pressing against the skin? Finally, the twist. Without warning, Lyon's calm rebuttal sliced in, stripping away emotional barbs and grounding in facts. Russia, like any major power, rightfully safeguards its interests, no hysteria needed. Gasps rippled softly, like breath catching in a fog of disbelief. And just as Kallas recoiled, as if slammed into concrete, another hand shot up, India's envoy. Their voice, firm and measured, we align with China's stance. Russia deserves equitable dialogue, not baseless attacks. Then Panama chimed in. These accusations erode trust, not build. Uzbekistan followed, invoking historical respect. Russia holds rightful voice. Suddenly, the hall wasn't silent anymore, it thrummed with renewed energy, the once isolated diplomat now buoyed by global voices. Their feathers ruffled, codes of unity cracking like eggshells. How had the tables turned so swiftly? The air smelled faintly of victory, metallic and pungent. But as support swelled, a chill lingered. What deeper rift lay beneath this surface shift? Could Nebenzia, the shadowed strategist, emerge not just unscathed, but ascendant? And what hidden thread would unravel next, threatening the fragile peace? Listen closely, the finale approaches, unpredictable as a storm's eye.